Welcome back to Chess.com's I'm Not GM Speechless Championship. Grandmaster Robert Hess alongside me today, Grandmaster Aman Hamilton. Aman, you've had quite a busy schedule lately. How are you feeling today?
What's up, Robert? And hello to Twitch chat. Good to be back. Good to be back. I have been commentating a lot, but I'd like to think that this is just Twitch rivals. Maybe it was just practice for this I am not a GM tournament, Robert.
Yeah, I like to say no rest for the fantastic commentators. You are great, so no rest for you. And let's remind everybody of what we're here for today because it's been a while. This is the I'm Not a GM Speed Chess Championship. The format is the following. As you see in front of you, we have a bracket, single elimination knockout, 75 minutes of 5 minute plus 1 second increment blitz, followed by 45 minutes of the 3+1, and finally 25 minutes of everyone's favorite bullet chess. Only the winner survives and advances. We will have the one of the two finalists after today's match, and the prize money amount it's getting bigger. And the participants should be quite happy to take home $450 by themselves, plus the 450 split by win percentage, and of course the chance at the championship.
Yeah, that's awesome. We were both a part of yesterday the Twitch rivals event where we saw so many people taking home cash for their participation. And I like to see those rewarding formats where players are taking home cash regardless of where they place.
Absolutely. And we're going to remind everybody of what we're here for today. It is International Master Molina and International Master Lars Oskar Hauge. And as you see in the bracket, there are only 4 people remaining. We are on the right side of the screen here. Roberto, Lars. On the left side, we have Greg Shahade taking on Levi Rosman. And I guess before we dive into today's match, Aman, what do you make of the other one between Greg and Levi? I'm sure so many people are excited for Greg Shahade and Gotham Chess.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the I Am Not a GM tournament has progressed to the semifinal stage. So we are so close to crowning that winner. And Greg Shahade, speaking of potential winners, #1 seed going into the entire event, is obviously a front runner. I think there's a lot of fans of both sides here, but you have the #1 seed in Greg Shahade, and then you have fan favorite Levi Rosman, who I think you'll maybe echo this, but every match we've commentated of his so far has been extremely exciting. So I can't wait for this. This is going to be really, really tough to call. I think Greg has to be the favorite going in, but I think what we've seen from Levi is that he can win any match, especially in the bullet segment.
That's right. He's been gaining rating recently. He's been posting about that, crossing 2,800 blitz,
Yeah.
of course. And so he is in good form. But that's enough of that matchup. Let's talk about today. We have Roberto. We have Lars Oskar Hauge. They are about to begin. And I'm not sure who the favorite is. I know that Lars has been dominant in the bullet portion. He has really just been cruising by his opponents there. But he struggled out of the gates. In the blitz portion, his openings have left him in a bit of trouble. So who's style do you think will be better between these two players?
Well, I think that, and what we do know about these players as the first game is underway here, what we do know about these players is I think we're going to see a big style mismatch, which is why I'm so excited for the match today, because Roberto, very, very solid. If you give the guy a trade, he'll take 5 of them. So he'll be looking to go for those end games, but more positional style. And we've seen a very loose play from Lars, which is why I think he's been doing so well in bullet. I think you're rewarded for being a little bit more loose in your style when it comes to bullet chess, where you can't calculate everything out so efficiently. But in the blitz portion, look for Roberto to try to press his advantages, I would say, because I think that they're going to see a few openings that don't necessarily go in the way of Lars Oskar.
I agree with that. And we already see that Roberto takes the calmer approach on move 5. He went E3 rather than playing the more adventurous tactical sequences with E4. So Roberto calmly enters this position here where white has a bit more space thanks to that pawn on D4, but black has no weaknesses that can be targeted. So I would say that these styles of position are more up Roberto's alley, hence his opening choice in game 1.
Yeah, and that calm approach with E3 is going to mean you're not going to see these types of positions where I guess we might see C5. It could immediately get very symmetrical after something like C5, D captures C5, and we get a position like that. And just looking at the position already, I know that Lars has got to be happy with his opening because it's actually one of the more solid approaches we've seen from him. At the same time, it seems like it's exactly what Roberto wants starting off here.
That's true. And I think now, if he's going to start getting active, a move like knight e5 comes to mind. You typically want to place a knight in the square, try to replace it with a pawn. But I do like bishop e1 first because you want the opening of the d file, not just a pawn on e5. So I like bishop e1. It's very calm. It challenges Lars to figure out, do I take on d4? No, keeping the tension with rook to d8. And d5 is an additional possibility for white. I'm just not sure how that plays out.
Agree. Yeah, d5 is the first thing that I think of here with bishop takes c3 being met by potentially just d6. And in the meantime, after d5, if you exchange everything on that square, sometimes those endgames, they might look like nothing, Robert, but those equal endgame positions with that slight imbalance of pawns, 4 versus 3 for white on the king side, 3 versus 2 for black on the queen side, those can sometimes materialize into serious advantages at this high level.
Yeah, you can be lulled into a sense of comfort. Oh, it's a fine position, nothing major happening. But those end games, as you're saying, they can be quite difficult to hold. And right now, look at Lars. He's trying to figure out what to do. He is down 40 seconds on the clock and still not making a move yet because he's trying to figure out, do I take on d4? Do I play h6 just to make luft for my king? What move would you play here, Mon?
Well, yeah, obviously I would play c takes d4, Robert. But yeah, cd4 is always on the cards for black. That pawn tension there. I was wondering mostly how Roberto was going to recapture. If I had to make a prediction, I would have actually said that he would take back with a piece rather than a pawn, just stylistically. But he's taken back with the pawn. He's looking at these d5 options still, and he does have that knight e5 move that you mentioned so long ago. So I think this game is sort of revolving around the fact that the knight on f6 cannot jump into d5 so easily because white can win a piece, but or not quite win a piece, but at least force that e pawn to capture back. And that knight on d7 can't really get to b6 to d5, which is a really common maneuver. So I think the issue in this game, it might be surprising, but the knight on d7, Robert, doesn't have a lot of places to go. And after knight e5, white's going to be tempting him to trade.
That's true. And the knight on d7 dominated by a pawn 3 squares away. That d4 pawn taking away 4 jumps. And also, I would say that pawn on a6, a big problem for black. Notice how Lars went rook f to d8 and then rook d to e8. And he still can't move his rook on a8 because it's attached to that pawn on a6 where the queen and bishop are lined up on that side of the board. So this is a tricky position for Lars to deal with. And look at the clock. I mean, so much more time for white here. Bishop f4 is a move that I would play. There he goes. That bishop went from e1, doing not so much, to f4, where maybe it's not threatening anything just yet, but it's a strong piece. And now we're going to see trades. You said give him 1, he'll take 5. I think let's get trades for 3 for Roberto.
Yeah, I'll get a full size offering of trades with bishop h2. Wow, I'm almost proud. I'm almost proud watching here, Robert.
Well, he said if we're going to trade, it's going to be on my terms to take on c3, help my pawn out. But that knight on d7, Amon, you mentioned it, it gets out, but in comes the knight to e5. I do feel like we're still in Roberto's wheelhouse, but it's getting a bit sharper now that the knight on d7 has ventured over to f6.
Yeah, I definitely think that taking on d5 was a sort of a one-time opportunity, a limited time offer, because the pawn would have to recapture, and after knight to f6, all of a sudden the pieces can handle the recapturing. Rook a to c8, Robert, goes back to what you were mentioning about the a6 pawn. I mean, why is that pawn safe here? Can he get away with rook a to c8?
I don't think so. Knight takes d5, followed by bishop takes a6 is what I'm going for without much of hesitation. And there it goes. Step 1 complete. And no matter how you take on d5, the a6 pawn goes down. So it's one of these positions, Amon, where you start feeling, all right, I'm doing better as black. My first knight gets to d5. My superfluous knight gets to f6. And now one trade, down goes a6. And you're just down a pawn. But perhaps there's some kind of queen g5 at some timely moment, hitting G2, hitting C1. I'm not quite sure it works out, but I would be looking for that kind of tactical sequence.
Yeah, 100%. If bishop takes a6, I'm already wondering about rook takes c1 followed by queen g5 as an idea, hitting the rook on c1 and eyeballing that g2 square. The bishop is still going to be on b7, so there's still some firepower lined up there, and it's also going to be stuff like knight f4, knight c3, discovered attacks if white's not careful. So that's what Roberto is thinking about here. And we mentioned the style clash at the beginning of this matchup. I think that those types of positions are where Lars really, really thrives, where it gets messy and tactical, and he does have that sharp tactical vision.
And that's for sure the case based on the time situation, where now we're about even on the clock. Bishop takes a6 was played. Roberto puts on his calculation cap and decides to go for it. But queen g5 right now is played by Lars. He doesn't need to be asked twice. Where does this rook go to him on?
Yeah, where does the rook go to is a great question, because knight f4 sort of looks like I guess there's maybe queen g4 or something in a position like that, but it looks really suspicious here. I don't really know where this, like, if you go rook to d1, or basically a rook to any normal square, I get the feeling that black should be fairly happy with some of the tricks in the position. Maybe even just bishop to a8 next move, Robert. Just keep that guy and say, all right, I'm going to threaten some stuff next turn. It's up to you.
I think you have to avoid the knight's jump, because we keep looking at knight f4, and that's where my mind was. I was tunneling. But after rook d1, maybe there's knight c3, because now we hit the queen and the rook in the event of queen g4. So maybe you have to play a move like rook a1, just hide your rook all the way away, just to avoid some kind of knight jump that would hit that rook in addition to the g2 square with checkmate.
That's crazy. Rook a1 being required here that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, because other moves like he goes rook c2, maybe that's also sufficient. I thought there would be a knight jump, but the knight can't take the own bishop on b4. But you need to stay out of the bishop's path, out of the knight's path, all of these pieces for black doing well. But your idea is coming to fruition here. After knight f4, which looks like a mating idea, queen comes to g4 to stop the checkmate. And yes, that bishop a6 will lose the defender, but then knight on f4 will lose its defender as well. So we're actually seeing a very weird series of trades, and the tactics are flying.
Yeah, and I think that position after knight f4, queen g4 is going to liquidate favorably for Roberto, and he's going to be on the open file as well, which is important. If that rook was on a1, like you mentioned, maybe that black can go for that line and just go rook c8 at the end and start invading. So it is something to pay attention to, that keeping the queens on the board here is something you want to do. Is bishop a8 crazy? Because with 48 seconds to 50 seconds, if my knight f4 stuff is not working here, I'm not too sure what to do. I might just play bishop a8 instinctively.
It's one of these positions where I feel like you have to trust your intuition and play knight f4, but he's thinking too long at this point, because bishop a8, then queen g4 anyway, and it feels like the queens are coming off, or you're backtracking and you no longer have an attack. But Lars now is down on the clock. Roberto probably feeling much happier about the state of his position, and knight f4 eventually was played. But what's the follow-up?
Yeah, you can take this bishop right away, or you can decide to trade the queens. Rook c2 is actually really nice instead of rook a1. It prevents like queen d2 in a lot of lines.
Yes.
So it means the queens definitely get traded off. Bishop takes f4, and these are the trades that we're seeing. But this is why I was pointing out, Robert, it's so good that the rook is on c2 on the open file, and knight c6. Isn't that just a big fork?
Yeah, that's game over. That's forking the rook and the bishop. There's no way you can protect the bishop. So you're going down a full piece after this move, and resignation on the spot.
Wow.
Oh, did you see Roberto there?
Yeah.
He feels so relieved after a stressful game one.
And Lars is like, I mean, he's shell-shocked from the blunder, but he doesn't look that phased. He's like, all right, that's game one for you. Just getting started here, just getting warmed up.
That's the key, just getting started. And because Roberto is more of kind of a trader, a player who wants to say, let's get pieces off the board, not have it be so complicated, he has to bring his gut with him today. He's not just going to be in here, all right, easy games. Look at this. What is this position on move 7, right? We have pawns going up the board. There's already some kind of f takes e5, queen h4 check available. Is that good? I'm not positive, but nor is Roberto. And I'm sure Lars isn't either, but we're getting crazy positions from the very start of the games.
Yeah, this is trademark Lars. The position is going to get pretty spicy after a move like this, because immediately I think everyone's eyes should be drawn to the idea of, hey, pawn takes pawn on e5, and no matter how that is recaptured, black is already thinking about the move queen h4 check, just an immediate attack. When you see the move g4 and f4, I mean, we all know fool's checkmate Mr. Hess. And I mean, those two moves invite a check like that. I mean, what are we seeing here?
I think that we're going to see maybe a g5 at some point, and we're going to lock that side of the board up. But that bishop on g6 not looking that great. Although after g5, perhaps it goes to h5 just to try to keep that side closed. I don't think that black can get away with this. I really believe that g5, knight g3, h4, just start throwing our pieces up the king side. And I'm not liking Roberto's position that much.
Yeah, after f5, like g5 h4 with knight g3 coming looks like a lot of fun. I think there's probably, I was about to say, a knight g3, like a more aggressive way to do the same thing, where you want maybe pawn takes pawn, and then you could take back with the queen. You're coming with h4 h5, bishop d3. This is going to be a fight for some of the light squares on the king side. It's really all about this f5 square. If black can continuously take back with a piece and establish a piece on that square, I think he's gonna have a really solid position. Meanwhile, bishop d3, Lars is not looking to let that happen.
I think you take on g4 though, and if you take on g6, maybe black plays h takes g6 and gets a stronghold of this f5 square with the pawns. It doesn't look pretty, I acknowledge that, but you can't allow yourself, and there we see the start of it, you can't allow yourself to just be pushed back move after move, and h takes g6 is a must. Here we go. And I think king f7. Your king is surprisingly safe there because of the pawn on d5, right? Knight can't get over to g5, but for now, I mean, it makes sense. Let's try to castle queenside. That's probably smarter. Not my game, so I'll put my king on f7 and don't deal with the consequences. But here he just brings his king to the queen side. And how does white make progress despite the pleasant-looking position?
Well, I immediately think of something like, h4 just kind of locks everything down if you really want to open things up, and meanwhile undermine the f5 square, Robert. I think of h4, h5 to get rid of the g pawn. In that case, there's also, if you're ever not sure what to do in a position like this, how about the move king b1 and king b8? Those moves are your friends, Robert, when you queenside castle and you don't know what to do next. I think most people, especially stronger players, will agree that, hey, if you play king b1 or king b8, you're not doing something wrong.
I'm with you there, partner. And I think strategically, white is in a better position because this knight on a6 is going to have to resort to passive defense, going to c7 in the near future. But then again, the knight on c7 is very helpful because the pawn on e6 is a target. But I like this move h5. You're trying to remove the defense of this f5 knight. And queen f7, I think, is a nice response because after h takes g6, rook takes g6, at least for the time being, white isn't just quick enough to take on f5. So I like how both players are playing this. And I could see this turning in Roberto's favor. I didn't like his position to start with. Now, all of a sudden, it seems like he's stabilized. And that rook h6 move in particular felt clever.
Yeah, the one, I guess, fairly concrete line I'm looking at is takes on g6, rook g6, followed by queen h5. And if somehow I can play knight takes f5 successfully and force the pawn to recapture, not sure about the endgame. I feel like white should be slightly preferred. Black's knight will eventually reach the e6 square, so it's fairly double-edged, I would say. I don't think either side is got anything to write home about just yet.
That's the annoying thing, right? Your whole goal is to undermine the defense of f5, and then when you do it, a knight appears on e6, and you're like, darn it, knights are the best blockading pieces. But I think you have to take on g6 at some point. You're sort of running out of time. You don't want to allow black to double on the h file and start causing some problems. So here we do see that trade, and queen h5. Now, that seems completely reasonable, but instead he backs it up to f3.
Yeah, queen h5 looked very normal. I mean, queen f3 is absolutely nothing wrong with that move, but queen h5 seemed to make sense to me. I guess it would be met by rook f8 all the same.
Yeah, there's no way to pile up on the pinned rook that would have been there, so the queen would have been defended anyway. So now there's this crazy amount of tension along the f file, the f5 square and the f4 pawn behind it. If white takes on f5, then in comes black's queen to f5, where look at that c2 pawn, by the way, Amon. A timely knight b4 could spell some serious trouble for white.
That's a great point. That's a great point. We might see an immediate rook h5 after queen takes f5 in order to dissuade exactly what you're talking about. You don't have time to get knight b4 in. You've got to move your queen back to f7, and then temporarily white is the one who sort of has control over that f5 square. We might see rook h5, f5, knight f4, just some quick activation ideas.
That would be a thematic pawn sack, but after rook h5, can you play rook g5 and offer you a trade?
Wow.
You know,
That's just cute.
I think you have to because I don't want to be pushed back. Queen f7, he should f5 looks like a great pawn sack. He goes queen g4, all right, not giving white the opportunity to press forward just yet. But I thought rook g5 was a way to trade some pieces and keep some of the pressure on white's position.
He was neither as passive as I was suggesting or as flashy as you were suggesting. Just queen g4, nice and simple. Get those trades in.
And white's better here because that knight on e2 covers f4, whereas the g7 pawn, the e6 pawn, those are both weaknesses. Rook h7 being the obvious next move for white, just putting pressure on the pawn. And I think that black, it's about time. Maybe knight c7. The knight going up to b4 does all of nothing. It'll get kicked right back to a6. So knight c7 at least protects e6, one of your two potential vulnerabilities.
Yeah, the other move I would consider is just king over. King d7 seems ever more natural than king d8, but same idea that you may want to bring that king to f7 at some point. And one thing to watch out for, even though it's tempting, is let's say this king gets to f7 and white starts thinking about f5. Sometimes takes, and the black king goes to e6, or if the rooks get traded, black is the one that's going to have the outside pass pawn. So although white is going to get a protected pass pawn in the middle, we've talked already about how it can be blockaded successfully. And I know he's got f5 available, but I'm just not sure that that's necessarily the right way to proceed, Robert.
Yeah, that's a good point because we've been talking about f5 for so long that you may just say you have to play it when given the opportunity. And now black can play king g6 and say you're not getting your f5 movement.
Uh-huh. Everyone's
doesn't.
bringing the king towards the middle. Finally, that knight does retreat to c7, looking to get involved somehow. And now I think the move f5 is less and less likely because the knight is ready to jump into e6.
And you give black the outermost pass pawn when you play f5 because right now the g7 pawn is met by the f4 pawn, but as soon as you play f5 and we get some trades, then the g pawn actually becomes a passer. So I'm with you. I think that f5 is less and less likely, but I don't know how to proceed otherwise. I would say b3 and c4, but then I'm like, then what? The d5 square is so well defended. I don't actually know how to break through here.
Yeah, I think this is the type of position where you just kind of play c3, you kind of play a4, a few moves for white that seem natural. I also wouldn't be surprised by maybe the king even rerouting further towards the king side. And basically, the position is exactly what it says it is, dead level.
And I think that Lars is the one who actually has to accept the draw here because if he gives up control of the H file, he could be in trouble. So after king g7, the next move will be rook h8, but rook h8 here will be met by f5 because the rook on g1 pins the pawn on g6 to the king. That's why Roberto shifts his king right back to f7. Perhaps he could, move his rook. I would not even think about it at this point. No reason to get tactical. You're holding steady with the black pieces, and a draw is agreed.
Yeah, and that's a sort of a just feeling out the competition here. Draw early on, both players get on the scoreboard. You're probably happy as Lars just to get that half point up there and go to the next game. That's not the type of position that we've seen Lars score his points from in this tournament so far.
Right, and now we get to game 3. Once again, the white pieces for Roberto. He plays a very solid position, right? Just pushed his pawns in the center, developed, castled kingside, gave his opponent an isolated queen pawn, but perhaps this is a position that suits both of them. Because strategically, from a structural point of view, white is happy to give black an isolated pawn. But Lars is saying, wait a second, maybe I'll get an attack on the h2 pawn. You don't have a knight on f3. So if I can line my pieces up against your king side, there are some attacking prospects. So I think both players should be happy out of the opening.
Yep, I agree. This looks like, just right off the bat, sort of feels like one of those isolated pawn positions where black should be a bit happier than usual. I always find the bishop on f3 to be a little bit awkward. Moves like knight e5, putting pressure immediately on that bishop, and knight takes e6 is sort of like a fake threat. Like I never really am convinced by knight takes e6 because black takes with the f pawn and opens up the rook and immediately is threatening like moves like e5, e4. So I'm not too sure if Roberto should be that happy with his position. He's already gotten rid of the isolated pawn by capturing on c6.
Yeah, something has gone wrong. I don't like the decision to take on c6, but as you point out, knight e5 was probably a concern of his, and that's why he took there. But now that pawn on d5 is very well defended, and okay, I'm taking with the f pawn, but perhaps queen takes is the right choice here. But I would take with the f pawn and not even think about it, because then you have a mobile pawn center, and here comes e5. You mentioned that move, then perhaps e4. And what are these bishops doing for white? It feels like you're several moves behind in terms of development.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, definitely more of a Lars move to play f takes e6. Like he's very interested in the imbalances, and it's not even for that reason that you might play it, because look at that center. I mean, how do you say no to that? There's no c pawn that's going to be undermining the center here. Can't even push the e pawn that easily, like e4. Definitely a move I would consider, but tough to play. If white can get e4 and black plays d4, those are the type of light square imbalances that I think Roberto would be looking to create. But after b4, he's hinting at, queen b3, b5, trying to undermine this way. I think it could be a little bit slow here, Robert.
Yeah, you desperately try to seize control of the light squares for your bishop, but I like black's position. We both do. And one of the ideas that I do like about this b4 move is black could have considered pawn e4 and bishop to e5. When your opponent has a bishop pair and you can trade off one of them and then have a knight against a bishop, you can dominate the other color complex. However, b4 does have this continued threat of undermining the pawns on d5. That pawn needs to be defended by that pawn on c6 for the most part. The a7 pawn stuck in place, potentially a target with queen a4 at some moment.
Right.
So I'm not sure anymore. I'm sort of second guessing myself. I like black's position, and all of a sudden I'm saying, this doesn't look so easy to make progress despite this great pawn center and this bishop on d6.
Yeah, that's a good point. The move e4 opens up the bishop towards the king, but without the access to the g4 square for black's knight, it's very hard to coordinate on that square. Like, you don't have bishop b8, queen d6 so easily, and if you do, white will happily just play g3 and kill that idea. So I agree. It sort of feels like one of those positions that Lars is maybe getting the same feeling that you and I are right now. As we look at the clock, I mean, he's down more than a minute, getting close to a minute and a half that he's thinking here, because he's trying to find the right plan. And speaking of the right plan, I don't think that c5 is the right plan, but it's what he's chosen because he had to make a move.
Just couldn't find what he should do, so he went for this, and it's not bad. I don't think either of us believe that, but after this trade on d6 coming our way, or maybe, I guess you have to trade d6 now because rook's in c4, and then just moves like queen b3. Well, maybe queen b3 is bad because rook b8, but and then bishop takes d5 check. That's actually a really cool tactic. I blundered
there
into
you go,
it.
Robert.
Oh my gosh. Well, there are tactics everywhere, it seems, but
That
this
would have
type
been
of
sweet.
yeah, it was a mistake that it happened, but I was just going through some of these positions, and yeah, rook d1 next.
You know what, Robert? You've convinced me. You deserve a spot on the analysis board.
Thank you. Rook b8 looks like it just kicks the queen away, but the queen on d6 can't take on d5 and protect the rook on b8. So
beautiful.
Oh gosh. So
All right,
what's this position though, Amon? Because it does feel like black is way more active here, and yet I see the eval bar on screen saying completely equal.
Yeah, I mean, well, unfortunately, your bishop d5 isn't working in every position, so we can't lean on that here. Queen b4, looking for a queen trade, and queen d3. There's e4 to consider, so lots and lots of reasons why you'd be tempted by the trade. I think that allowing the trade on b3 is sort of comfortable because you take with the b pawn and you can swing your rook over to a file. So even something simple and calm on the king side like g3 or h3, just that a little escape square so that your rook can go to the a file afterwards and do something aggressive like rook takes a7.
I think that would be the best way forward. And Roberto, he knows how to play these end games, and it just seems like some pawns will get traded off and neither side will have enough remaining, and the pawns will be on the same side of the board. Sure, black has two central pawns and then two kingside pawns, and white only has one pawn island, but the knight is very good on f6 defending his d5 pawn. So there's nothing to worry about from black's perspective, and from white's perspective, it's like you can't attack anything once the queens come off. So it seems like it should just be an equal game.
Yeah, and I like the move queen b4 by Lars. It might not be, the move that gets the brilliancy award or anything like that, but I think that if you stayed in the position with queens on the board, it was going to benefit Roberto the longer the game went. A simple move like rook d1 coming up next would put a lot of pressure on the d pawn. With the queen on d6, you'd be threatening queen takes c4. So just like the idea to trade off, even though it might not be the most aggressive move or the most aggressive way to play.
But those are very important moments in chess that are taken for granted. It's like, well, all he did was offer a queen trade. It's like, well, if he didn't do that, he probably would have suffered in the position. It would have become increasingly difficult to fend off some of White's plans and thus could have caused a losing game. So I actually think that this is a moment that we should give credit to Lars for recognizing the potential danger. And by Roberto's time management right now, he is really in the think tank and about to be at 1 minute. And now Lars might be thinking, wait a second, I thrive in bullet. Maybe I can play for more despite the board situation being one that should be equal.
And, you might say, wow, queen, b4, not so impressive. Well, it caused Roberto to think for like 2.5 minutes there, Robert. So, I mean, that's just a testament or proof right there from Roberto himself that was a very strong move.
And he was probably trying to figure out a way to avoid getting a super passive position. You don't want to sit and have a defensive rook against your opponent's attacking rook. And that's why he was just trying to see, do I play g3? Should I play rook b1 first? What's the right move order? And g3 was his choice. Now Lars has a bit extra time. Look at this move, king f7. We're getting into an endgame. Let's bring that king to e6. I actually think that White's position is more difficult to play right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to just saying like, queen d1, keep the queens on the board and try to play against that last move, king f7. Say like, oh, you're trying to cut the line basically, trying to get to the end game one move ahead of the end game itself. And queen d1, just keeping the queens on the board, maybe makes the king look a little silly.
I like that idea. And for Lars now, he has to weigh that. Well, the d5 pawns on attack. Can you really play king e6 here? After king e6, White actually can't keep the queens on because queen d3 is met by e4. Oh, actually, is there bishop g4 check there? Wait a second. Wait, if I can keep the queens on, I'm keeping the queens on.
Exactly. There is bishop g4 check, I think. But even if there is, and that's not established yet, a black could just move the king back. It's not so clear.
That's true. You can just move the king away and say, maybe you've committed too much to keeping the queens on the board.
Go back to g8 and say, okay, well, now you kept the queens on. Gotcha.
What's that called? Castling by hand is a thing. What's that called when you run your king in the center and then run it back?
I don't know. We got to come up with that. It's almost like a suicide at a track meet or something like that.
Suicide sprint there. Yeah, it's tough to give a true name to, but 12 seconds left for Roberto. This honestly is Lars's time. I would even consider a5 right now, just trying to be as advanced as possible in the position. And maybe there's king d6 in the near future, trying to bring the king into c5. It seems like a joke, but if I can get my king over to the square c5, I'm ready for this endgame.
100%. And even as we start to get into a potential endgame, like trading the queens, the king is also just closer to running to the queenside pawns. So even trading queens becomes a serious option.
And rook c2. Oh, now that bishop needs to stay put because knight g4 would be devastating.
Ooh, the pre-moves.
How can black keep... Maybe rook a2. I think that's probably the best way to keep that pawn on a7 safe. Now rook a1. Okay, once these pawns come off, I don't think there's any danger for White.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how things could go wrong. Black sort of has the draw if he wants it with rook b1, rook b2, because I don't think that the bishop can move, as you pointed out. But he obviously wants more than that. It's 5 seconds for his opponent. As you said, this is where Lars is going to play this game on.
Maybe there's some kind of rook b1, rook e1, and try to create a mating net. If that knight can find its way to f3, that's a very far way away. But I know that if my knight gets to f3 and my rook gets to b1, I could try to checkmate the white king in there. So, okay, wait, rook e1 coming?
Yeah, I don't know if there's rook c2 after rook e1. I don't know if I'm a big fan of g4.
Not at all.
As a move, because even if the rooks trade now, there's something to play for.
Wow, f3, what a move to play with 4 seconds in your clock. But if you take knight takes c4, this is looking scary. Knight g3 check is a fort.
The king comes in even as well. Yeah, there's a lot of good ways to take
rook f2. Rook f2 won the piece.
Oh my goodness, he wanted this.
Rook d2 check. King c.
Rook f2. Oh no, rook d5 is hanging.
Oh gosh. Yeah, the d5 pawn's hanging. Now
Oh
it's a
my
draw
goodness.
again.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, even though this is not beautiful for Roberto, this is um this is gonna be a draw.
Yeah, this is sufficient here.
Oh,
Although, if you take on g4 and white takes at the wrong point, there could be a losing king and pawn game. But here, you take and then create opposition. You need to be able to create opposition, not be in it to begin with. Oh, don't take on g4. Do
yeah.
not take on g4. 1 second. He barely got that move off.
What?
Oh my goodness. And it is a draw. He's gonna play knight f5, then he'll take on f5 if he ever does that. So
So
yeah,
if he's looking for king f1, king like h2, and at the right moment you sneak that pawn by.
but with that bishop on a8, no way.
Yeah.
Wow. And
So I would have kept the king on g3 and waited for this shuffling that white's doing with the king, because then it could work.
yeah, knight f3, just take it, and king f1.
Yeah. He's going away.
That's funny. Oh, that was a fun one. Look at Roberto. He's stressed, man. He just breathed out a heavy sigh of relief again. So these games are getting to him.
And you want to know who's not stressed? Lars. He never looks stressed. He always looks like bewildered is the best way to put it.
Well, then I can't tell. Is he always stressed or is he never stressed? It's one of these situations where it's one or the other because he does look bewildered. He's wide-eyed, trying to see through these positions. And look at this opening. Once again, we have a wild start to the game when Lars has the white pieces. So when Roberto's white, we get some calm approach. Maybe let's trade some pieces. I'm going to try to outplay you. From Lars, like, no chill. Let's just go for a pawn launch and see what happens.
Yeah, like I think when Lars is playing, he really tests the Chess.com opening theory book, and he really is trying to find out whether Chess.com has a name for all the openings that he's bringing out here. Like G4, all right, Chess.com. What's this one called?
That's actually really funny. And at a certain point, there's no name. You're just like, all right, that's the Lars. That's the
It'll
Lars.
have to be. It'll have to be.
And what is going on here? Because black is trying to crack through on the queen side, and it looks like white at some point will play on the king side, but white can actually castle king side. Black has no pieces over there. So even though you pushed your pawns to g5 and h4, castling king side should be safe for white, and castling king side for black could get you checkmated.
Yeah, you can castle king side despite the pawns being pushed.
Whoa.
You can. Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. Giving up the f6 square, Amon, that seems risky.
Let's go with risky. We'll call it risky. Call it even. He does castle kingside despite that knight getting in. We understand the move h6. It's like, hey, he wants to take, and after pawn takes, he's got the open file. But for the moment, that knight is covering the h2 square, and I was about to say knight g4 also covers h2 and prepares what he is dying to play, which is knight to e5 followed by maybe f4.
Wow, if you could get all those moves in, that's just probably strategically game over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a way to stop it. Well, knight d7 stops knight to e5, but can you start taking on the queen side? Like,
I feel
opening
like
up that side of the board, some kind of take on. I don't really want to take on c5 though. See, that's the annoying thing, because I want to open the whole queen side, but I want to keep control over the e5 square, and I know I can't get everything that I want. So need to time this kind of thing correctly.
I think taking a b4 might make some sense. If the pawn takes back, you've got the c file, and if the knight takes back, you temporarily get the e5 square. I don't know if you can make use of that though.
And instead, Lars plays the calm rook e1, but there could be an e4 in the near future, trying to open up the position against the king on e7. Although, wait a second, there's that bishop on b7. So there must be some tactical sequence. And I see the eval bar just jumped out of my periphery there. And now knight takes d4, maybe?
Yeah, d4 is loose. He's going to start by trying to open more lines with pawn takes on c3. But you immediately jump to that bishop on b7 and say, look, the knight's in the way. Got a hanging rook or loose rook on e4. Take that knight and drop it wherever you want, basically.
And taking the pawn d4 in the process looks great, and actually looks just unstoppable. And there's Lars sitting and thinking, but maybe a little bit too late. You should have thought before playing e4. Spent only 1.5 seconds playing the move e4, and now he's deep in the think tank trying to figure out, is there a way to survive this? And it doesn't look like the answer is yes.
And that's such a common chess player thing. It's like you play really quick, and then once you've played too quick that you might be losing, it's like, okay, well, let's spend the time and try to get out of this. Whoops.
Yeah, queen takes c3, which gives it the d4 pawn for free. Knight takes d4. The rook on e4 is hanging. Where do you even move that rook?
I think is he playing into no? Is he playing his sack? Well, he's playing his sack something, I guess is fair to say. But I was wondering about rook takes d4 and knight takes d4.
Probably necessary, but then we trade bishops on g2, and I think that white's king is in worse shape, even though black's king is in the center.
Yeah, temporarily after bishop g2, king g2, you have a threat of knight c6 to win the whole game, but it's super temporary.
Right. You make a move like rook c at the end, and then you say, "Oh, well, my one move threat is out the window." And Lars is
good.
Yeah, Lars is trying to figure this out here, but it's too late. And Roberto still looks really stressed. Like, somebody get that guy some fresh air.
Yeah, he is racking his brain right now. It's incredible. Like they're both obviously incredibly focused, but Roberto just looks like he had a death in the family or something. Like it looks serious.
It's just how much he wants to avoid these tactical games, I get the feeling. And he said that in previous matches where, his style is to trade against the end game, play solidly, and he has no choice playing against Lars. And the thing is, it may be a 3-1 lead after this game. It's still so early. And in the back of his head, it's like, wait a second, I got to play bullet against this guy. He's fast, he's sharp, he's tactical. And so he needs to save his nerves for when the moments really call for them. And that will be the quicker time patrols.
And we obviously probably do a good job of underselling how strong Roberto is at calculations and tactics, because he doesn't hang in games with very strong tactical players for no reason at all. Like his king's on e7, and somehow he's the one getting the upper hand in these skirmishes. So definitely a very accomplished player in his own right, and able to calculate as well, or often better than his opponents. E4 was a slip up by Lars, and look how quickly and look how efficiently that move was punished. Down on the clock is Lars, and down on the board.
Absolutely. And that is something that is good to point out. It's not that the players, either of them, are bad at what the other prefers. It's just a preference, a stylistic choice. So Lars can play end games at a very high level. He's an international master for a reason and highly rated, but it's not his first choice. If you say, let's get a position on move one without queens on the board or with two queens on the board, he's taking two queens on the board. And on the other hand, Roberto's saying, oh, queens off the board. Yeah, let's do that thing. Let's get to an end game. So it's just a clash of styles. And right now, Lars is down. He's half the time that Roberto does, less than half. And it's still looking good for black. No way to break through for white. No attack that I can see. And so it does look like Roberto should continue to take this game. But all of a sudden, the knight's on e5. Maybe there's queen f4 to f6. Black does need to be a bit careful here. Thankfully for Roberto, he has the time to calculate.
Yeah, and that rook on e4 is, there's so many sequences here. Like the rook on h5 is loose from the bishop. C6 is now targeted square for the knight to jump in, supported by the bishop on f3. Knight d5 looks to me like a nice intermezzo move, because you hit the queen, and the queen seemingly has to move to a square that watches that g5 pawn, but it doesn't. And looking at rook g5 and wondering what I'm missing.
The answer is probably nothing. And where's that king going? The knight on e5 is also, wait, you're just losing.
Everything's just hanging.
Right. That was a slip up. And actually, if we just show really quickly, I think that if Lars had played queen to d2 instead of queen to b3 there, he had a chance in this game, because if he had played queen d2, the pawn's protected, that rook's under attack on h5, the a5 pawn's under attack. So the queen is doing all the work, and black's position isn't that simple to figure out. So I think that was a missed opportunity by Lars. It was just not a great game from him. We've, of course, seen much better, and maybe he just felt out of it. But Aman, before we head to break, at our halftime break in the 5 minute portion. What are your thoughts about the match so far? Of course, Roberto leads 3-1, but how have you seen this match come along thus far?
I think I'm seeing it develop almost what I would expect. We see that Roberto is the higher rated blitz player, and we've also seen from matches previous that Lars generates a lot of his points from the bullet section. And I think he's also the type of player that, because of his style, not the most sound openings, maybe slightly dubious. It fits his style, but I think that takes a little bit of time to get going. You're not just gonna show up to the match and just play brilliancy right off the bat. So I think that type of style takes a little bit of time to get going, and he's obviously hoping to do a lot better in the bullet. So it actually is progressing much as I would expect. I don't think either player can be too disappointed at the moment, but Lars does need to find his footing from these openings.
Agreed, partner. Sometimes our blessing is our curse, and the tactical prowess of Lars Oskar Hauge, it can come back to bite him when he gets too tactical. He gets too rushed to break the position open, and that's what we saw here in this last game. On that note, we are going to take a break, and when we return, we'll have more from Chess.com's I Am Not GM Speed Chess Championship. Well, we know there are two people paying close attention to this match. It's not you and I, Amon. It is Greg and Levy, because the winner of that match takes on the winner of this one. And, well, what do you make of Monday's matchup between Greg and Levy, both of whom have been impressive thus far? Levy's matchups being quite close to get to the semifinals, and Greg having the odds match in the first round, and then against Kostya, just a 3 point victory for him. So, who do you see as the favorite in Monday's matchup?
Well, I think if we're talking about who has the momentum right now, it's got to be Levy Roseman, aka Gotham Chess, with his recent performances in Chess.com, Blitz, and Bull especially. He's going to come in, I think, the higher rated player in maybe both categories, Robert. So it definitely looks like on paper, the Levy train is in full force, and I'm having flashbacks right now to his last match against Eric Rosen, which was a primetime special. So obviously excited to get into more stuff like that.
That was one of my favorite events to commentate ever. That was so much fun. We had the call together. We were losing our minds. The players were nervous, and we will see Levy move on to face Greg, who of course has been a mainstay, a strong blitz player for so many years.
Right.
However, we're in the middle of this game. We see a repeat of the third game of the match. Roberto going back to this line in the Queen's Gambit decline, playing Bishop E2, trying to lead black with the isolated pawn. But we didn't really like what Roberto got in that game. What do you think he'll do differently?
It's a good question because for the opening moves, and this is sort of proving my point, I don't think there's much to change. So up till now, it's the exact same game. B3 and Bishop B2 is something that I thought he would do, at multiple points during that last game, or the last time we saw this opening. He's actually brought his knight from the center back to F3, which is a very strange move to me.
Yeah, is strange, but it's just trying to avoid trades, I guess. And yeah, it doesn't feel right. But he's protecting his king, and now he puts his bishop on A3 with tempo. So I'm sort of at a loss of what's happening here, but I don't mind it for either side, honestly.
Yeah, Bishop A3 is with tempo, but when you're attacking that rook on F8, I mean, every single time Black plays this opening, he's going to grab that rook from F8 and put it on E8. So neither side is, too phased by that little maneuver. Bishop A3, rook E8 is exactly what Lars would do anyway. Look for this light squared bishop to make an appearance either on, F5 or the more aggressive G4. But Bishop F5 played. It's looking to control the center, and rook might appear on C8. I mean, you pointed it out, and the eval bar backs you up. 0.00, basically, both sides doing well here.
And I like the bishop on A3 because it takes away queen D6, which is often a nuisance, setting up the battery for a checkmating attack. Knight E4, the knight just went to A4, so I might as well take this square that's available to me. And now knight C5. Let's trade knights. And when you see these trades being offered, the pawn on B7 is under attack, so black has to react in some way. But white is happy about this. You want to blockade the isolated pawn. So you want to make sure that black can't push D5 to D4. And if that bishop gets to C5, well, for sure you're not pushing that pawn.
Right. Yeah, if the pieces trade, the bishop blockades on D4. I think that Roberto is going to be pretty happy with that. Now, the pawn is hit on B7, and an attempt to guard that with rook B8 might also be met by knight B7. And I'll show you right here. Like this is a very typical maneuver. You play rook B8 thinking you're covering the threat, and the guy just does it anyway. And I don't think there's anything more disheartening in chess than protecting a threat, and then your opponent just does it anyway. So
right, you're
that's
like,
why he captured.
They always told me to look for undefended pieces. I defended it, but then it's a secondary layer, right? You take the pawn to remove the defense of the knight, and as you get better and better at chess, you need to be on the lookout for these things. And well, look at this. Oh, okay. I didn't like that move, Amon, because I thought rook E6 first. I was about to say a rook lift. People miss rook lifts all the time. And Lars, right, I think, should have started with rook E6 and then figure out, does the rook go to G6? Does it go to H6? But either way, the queen can join later, but the rook now cannot join because the queen's in the way.
Yeah, it's a great point. Starting with the rook, I mean, basically take that rook on E8, place it on G6 or H6 right now. That's where it wants to be. And the bishop is doing a great job on E4, contributing to the attack, F3, G2, but also contributing to defending that isolated pawn in the center. So it's a great anchor if you want to kick that bishop out at any point, bishop d3 in the future, bishop f3, you can also just leave the bishop there in Lars's position and say, hey, take me, bring my isolated pawn even closer to your king.
And yeah, knight d4 was a very good move because now in the event of some kind of queen h4, white can play the move f4. So that knight on f3, while it was defending the h2 pawn directly, it didn't allow white to push pawns forward. And you may say, wait, pushing pawns forward in front of your king, that sounds bad. But it also allows your other pieces to defend. For example, the queen on d2 will defend g2 once the pawn moves out the way and the bishop as well. So I actually think that rook e6 first, we talked about this, leading with the rook was good. Knight d4, a fantastic response by Roberto.
Yep. And the time, again, seems to be the classic case of the guy who's the better bullet player is lower on time. I don't know. This is becoming like a widespread, I guess, phenomenon that the better you are at bullet, the more comfortable you are letting your clock tick down, because you're 2 minutes to a good bullet player is like, oh, I got extra time. This is too much time. Whereas Roberto, who's obviously a great bullet player in his own right, but probably isn't counting on scoring as many points in that section as Lars could be in this match. He's always been up on time from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, good start to this match from Roberto, and this game, no exception to that. I was starting to wonder, I was kind of daydreaming about some Greek gift sacrifices. Now it's not going to be possible because white is going to play f4, I believe, to cut off that bishop. But I was just thinking, was there a bishop h2 and then a bishop g2 and all that kind of stuff? I don't have the answer to my own question. I'm guessing the answer is no, because Lars, the great tactician he is, would have played it if it worked out.
Yeah, it's something that he would be looking for at every turn. And you mentioned the move f4. There it is on the board. And this can be a really tough move to face because you know what? A lot of times in positions like this, Robert, black is required to make a pivot from full-on attack to, oh, I'm actually now going to transition into just playing this game normally. Maybe capturing on d4, going rook c8, nothing too special. And that might not be in the style that Lars wants to play in.
And this pawn e3, that looks like a backwards pawn, but hey, there's a bishop on c5. So that pawn is actually very well defended. And bishop d4, pile pressure against this pawn on c6. There's no attack that I see, at least not at the moment, for black. And so for white, you can start attacking, and putting that in air quotes, on the queen side, because there's some weak pawns that you can try to put threats on and win.
Yeah, bishop d4, queen g6, piling up on g2. So speaking of threats, take the air quotes off because that's an important one. And bishop f3, looking to trade some pieces. However, with all these bishops come off, I feel like white has to be pretty happy with that development.
Rook c6. There goes that pawn, just on the spot. I think you can take it. Maybe I'm overlooking some tactical sequence with bishop f3 or in queen b. No, I don't think that works. I think rook takes c6 is just a pawn you can grab, and that's a very important pawn. It's not just the material, but then white can have a free attempt at a pass pawn on the queen side with a4, b5 in the future.
And keep in mind, something like bishop f3, rook takes f3. There would be, bishop takes d4 might be an idea to take on e3 and fork the king and queen here as a discovered attack. But the rook on f3 perfectly defends that. So there's just no tricks, as you brought up. It almost feels like Lars played that move instinctively, thinking that there would be some of those tricks. Queen b1, bishop takes d4. But because there weren't any in the position, and there doesn't appear to be, Roberto called that bluff immediately with rook c6. Now Lars is fumbling for the next move here.
And you get frustrated when you overlook these kind of simple moves. Oh, my pawn was defended by the queen. The bishop got in the queen's path. Now I just dropped the pawn. And he's down almost 2 minutes. He only has a half minute himself. And this is looking like it should be Roberto's game, but it's not over, right? Black can play on here. It is a pawn deficit. That's no fun, but just keep going. And you need to play more quickly because otherwise you're losing the clock as well.
Yeah, and rook c8, I'll just point out, rook takes a6, for example. You can see that evaluation bar just say goodbye as rook c2, and you're threatening rook takes g2 and coming in with a very lethal checkmating pattern.
So you can't allow that rook to infiltrate. So do you take on c8 perhaps and just start trading those bishops off? Is that a way to go? Though rook c2 is still going to be a bit of a nuisance. So maybe you trade on c8 and then play rook c1 yourself. because of black's back rank checkmate problems. But okay, Roberto
Yeah,
answers the question.
I would trade on e4, and then you can trade on c8 and go rook c1, or you can just go rook c1. But trading on c8 and rook c1 um, does seem pretty reasonable.
Although if you trade on c8, rook c2 isn't an immediate threat, which is funny because it looks like it just wins the game because white has this rook c1 resource. So it's just funny how these things can happen. I just wouldn't even want to think tactically.
So like rook c8, I'll show rook c8, rook c8, and then imagine white just tries to bait him and just goes like h3, and
Right.
rook c2, rook c1 is Robert's idea. With the idea, of course, you can't take the queen because of back rank mate.
So you just want to see these things and just remind yourself, hey, wait, there's no left for the black king, so there could be a back rank checkmate. And actually, this is a good illustration of that because the e3 pawn, if you take with the queen on d4, it looks like you could win the pawn e3. You cannot. There's back rank checkmate. But I like what Roberto is doing, thinking at this moment. I'm actually not sure what to take with. Probably the pawn takes is better because if you take with the queen, there's a queen b1 check, queen takes a2 check. That looks like a lot to calculate. So pawn takes d4 is probably the best move. I just like that Roberto is spending some time, but he's about to dip maybe into too much time.
Well, queen b1, queen takes a2 with check would probably be enough for me to not play that on the spot.
Oh, and he does it.
Wow.
I was with you. I was not giving away that pawn.
I mean, listen, it's not a mistake, but not a huge blunder. But I think e takes was preferable.
And watch out now because queen f1 is a big threat. So king f2 played. And where's that king? Maybe he's not running anywhere. Maybe he's just accepting that it'll be a repetition.
Maybe they're both accepting that it'll be a repetition.
If you're Lars, you must be thrilled. You straight up blundered a pawn on c6. That was not a sacrifice. That was a blunder. We saw by his reaction. And yet he still was able to hold things together. And he was down almost 2 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And there's a reason why one of these players is shaking their head at the result, not both of them.
Yes, and he's still mad. He needs to. We all need to do this when we play a match. We need to get over our previous games. The problem is, in a tournament, you have a full day, right? If you're playing a classical chess tournament, you lose a game or you draw a game you're winning, you're frustrated. You say, "I'll eat, I'll sleep, prepare for my next game." Now it's like next game going, and snap, and you have to get right back with it. And look at Lars; he doesn't give you any time to breathe. He is threatening checkmate. Of course, Roberto's not going to allow that checkmate, but do I take on g5 and then allow that bishop into the game and castle's queenside? Or do I play g6, which was the choice? But now there are all these potential dark square holes on the king side. So no rest for the tactically weary Roberto Molina.
Yeah, and it's basically just Lars. He has this style that puts on relentless pressure in the opening. This line is clearly something that Lars is familiar with. It's a little bit off the beaten path. Just going back and showing this move, bishop e2 is not one of the most common moves here. I think this is an important game, an important moment in this match because we all know from previous matches with Roberto how fond or not fond he is of the Caro-Kann. He plays it as his main weapon, and if Lars gets great positions or starts crushing him with this opening, that could do a lot to Roberto's confidence. And he mentioned that in the post-game interview of his last match, that because his opponent was able to get such a good position against his Caro-Kann, speaking about Lawrence Trent, he was actually thrown off during the match.
He was indeed. And right now, he has what looks like a dream position. Whenever somebody establishes d4 and e5 pawns, you want to break down the pawn chain with the c5 move. And he's accomplished that. And knight c6 is the next move. The thing about this, I see the evaluation bar saying black is heavily favored. And Roberto has plenty of time. He has good experience, and he is a great player. But what I think about is where is that king going for black? If white can somehow maintain the pressure, then that king never finds true safety. And even if the objective evaluation is, oh, black's doing great, practically speaking, you always feel that knot in your stomach of, wait a sec, there could be some kind of sacrifice or some checkmating attack. And so Roberto needs to figure that out.
Yeah, and speaking of sacrifice, I'll just show one of the common ones that you're always thinking of, h6. If you play that without thinking too much, well, hang on, knight takes e6 is always a big idea. And queen takes g6 to follow up. bishop takes h6 is in the position. You might just run the f pawn. Queen takes e6 as well. Like this is how positions like that fall apart for black.
That's true. And so Roberto moves his queen out to b6. I like that move a lot. Hitting the knight on b5, protecting, I should say, the pawn on d4. And now a4 is played. So a6 would seem the logical follow-up. And white is going to play knight d6 check. So you've encouraged that knight in here. And I've always found these positions, Aman, to be extremely challenging to evaluate. I get the feeling, oh, black should be better, you're up a pawn. And then you're like, wait, how do I move from here? I can't castle queenside, f7 falls. I can't castle kingside. There'll be some big attack, especially with those exposed dark squares. Do I play e5, which for now is safe, but a rook e1 happens and maybe bishop moves in f4, breaks open the position? I'm never sure what move to play, even if I feel that the position should be good for black.
And if people don't believe you, what was funny is that while you were saying, I don't actually know how to evaluate these, the evaluation bar wasn't sure how to evaluate this. It started going up and down without any moves being played. Like it even takes the engine time to adjust the positions like this because of everything that Robert pointed out there. I mean, the king, we need a decision. Which way are you going? E5 in the center. And after rook e1, is it going to be something like f6, allowing the knight into e6? It looks like too much. You gotta put the king somewhere.
Yeah, I grimace at the thought of f6. The knight coming into e6 scares me. The knight can go to c7. Wow.
Well, grimace away. Grimace away. Knight e6, king f7. And that... wow.
That is impressive. That knight is very scary. And knight e6, just king f7. And the knight goes to c7. I don't know how to evaluate this position. I feel like... I know I can see the evaluation bar off to the side over here when I tilt my head this way. I see that black is doing well, but Roberto doesn't know that. He's trying to figure this out. He probably thinks, okay, I have a good chances here, but he doesn't know with any degree of certainty that black is in the driver's seat. And I don't know what move should be played, even if when I do see that the evaluation is good for black. Is it king f7? Is it, okay, king f7 was played and queen h3, and I see the EVA bar kind of going up a little bit for white.
Doesn't know what to do.
I have no idea. It's that kind of wild position. I think I would play the move. I would not take the bishop. That's for sure. That scares me too much. Maybe I should do that. I'm not doing that. The queen on h3 lines up against that knight on d7. The rook would have the open e file. That looks pretty scary. I just also don't know what else to play though.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's at least knight g5 after taking on f4 with the queen getting right involved in the position. That looks like it cannot be good. There's no chance.
It's probably, I'm guessing it's one of those positions that's going to be like, oh, it's a draw because of some weird, saving idea for black that just forces white to take a repetition. It's like one of those types, but it doesn't look good. I could also see white just winning in the next few moves. What other moves come to mind besides?
What about like knight? I want to move my knight somewhere. Okay.
Oh, look at the eval bar. I saw the skyrocket.
So I was going to say move the knight from c6 as he did somewhere. And then knight c7, I want to play queen d6. So that's the general idea is that, I'll sack an exchange to get rid of that pawn. However, right now, I don't think it's an exchange. And bishop takes e5. I don't even think it's going to be knight move at all. Oh my goodness. Knight g5 he wants.
He wants knight g5. He could probably even play rook take. Okay, not probably. He just does it.
He just does it.
Don't need to tell him what to do. And
queen d6.
Queen d6 is you have to play that move because pawn takes e5 with knight g5 check coming. Your king is getting mated in the near future. So I think queen takes d6 and just put your hands together. Talk to Kaiser there and say, please help me survive this game because no way.
Well, no way. That's who you need to talk to right now. Knight g5, not the move.
Do you know what that means? F4 was the move, like bringing in another.
F4, F5.
What a
okay, but queen e6. Like I don't think I'll be satisfied. It must be rook f8. No, rook f8 loses immediately.
Yeah, to queen e7.
Well, like I said, I'm not convinced that black survives this. So if he does, he deserves everything.
18 seconds left. Knight c6. Okay, queen d7, the only check. Where's
queen f7?
Oh, queen f7. Didn't even think about that. But I
Look
like
at
queen
this
e7.
evaluation bar. It's like doing jump rope.
Knight f7 check. I like queen e7 because you kept this square open for that. Knight takes e5 check. Just keep taking things with check.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that king going? After king h6, you have knight g4. There has to be a mate here.
Of course. And king f6, there's maybe f4 as well.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Okay, knight g4.
So,
I mean,
wait, I actually don't see a mate just yet. So it looks like there has to be something.
what do you think about h3? It's just some move like that.
I like that. I like h3, especially because Roberto has 10 seconds left.
He's 10 seconds. That's the other thing, is that practically it's winning as well.
And h3, queen g7, queen h6, you protect them. That's super clever. I like that.
I like h3 for that. Because I was even thinking about queen g7 right now as a hey, take a step forward if you're that ballsy. But I think h3 is probably the way to go.
Look at Lars's eyes, by the way.
Yeah, no.
He played h3.
Yeah,
great move.
This evaluation bar is not. I have no idea what it's doing.
It's been at the bar too long. It's got to go home. Queen g7, threatening mate in 1, queen h6, and after queen g5, I'm sure just knight f6 check, which okay, knight f6 check. Where's the mate though?
So knight f6,
king g5,
knight f6, king g5, f4, king f5,
g4, king e6.
Oh, queen d7,
d7
and g5.
Mate. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, wait. Roberto's 1 second, by the way. He's gonna lose he doesn't lose in time. F4 check. Here's the mate coming. Exactly what we were talking about.
Oh, and f4, king h4, king h2.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful.
That's filthy.
Oh my gosh. There's nothing you can do about it. No, this
and
is just
g3
checkmate.
mate.
Here it comes. King f. Oh, he lost in time, but we have to show. Look at Lars's face. Oh my gosh.
If he got that move off, and I'll go back and show you guys so many cool mates there in that position. So before we get into the next game, we got to show king h4, king h2. If nothing else, Robert, tons of style points.
Yes.
Sacking your queen and checkmating with a pawn, the knight, the f pawn, everybody working, the king's involved. You don't even need that rook over there. And the other one we were looking at was king f5, g4 check. King's only got 1 square. Queen d7 check. King takes knight, and then another pawn checkmate. That's just you don't get attacks that capitulate with pawn checkmates all the time, Robert.
No, that was a gorgeous tactical sequence, and you could tell that Lars was feeling it. And honestly, what we're talking about, we know the evaluation bar at first was saying black is doing well, and I'm sure if you just switch on the engine, look at the suggestions, there were ideas and moves for black to survive. But practically speaking, it's just beyond difficult in a blitz game. So Lars really earned that one. And for Roberto, I don't think you have to stray from your Karakana. I mean, he was doing well. He's going to get a break after this portion. I would just quickly, text a friend or turn on the engine and to review that game. So, okay, I could have actually survived and had a good position if I'd done these 2 things. Then you feel better about going right back to that Karakana.
Robert would, after getting checkmated by a pawn, immediately text a friend.
Hey, I need emotional support and I rely on my friends. I try to be open. I talk through my feelings, Aman.
Yeah, your support system for those tough checkmates. It's good to have one of those around.
Yep, we all need friends. And Lars, by the way, he's up a pawn in this position.
Yes.
But there's a bishop pair that's staring towards black's king.
Yeah, it does. It actually looks like, if you reverse the names, that's the position I would expect them to have. Lars has actually been the greedy one here. He's gobbled that center pawn, and you talked about rook lifts. Well, how about an assisted rook lift?
I actually was about to say I love the move bishop e4. That was a really good defensive move, but I liked the response. Instead of taking on e4 or doing anything, you just try to improve your rook. But knight f5 is so frustrating because now your rook lifts don't look quite as good. The d4 pawn needs some attention. And how to proceed g4 for white, that looks quite risky. but I could see that panning out. And watch out for d5 at some moment as well, opening that bishop up. So just like the other game, the one we just saw, this is a situation where, sure, black is probably having a healthy position according to the engine, but
Right.
practically speaking, there's so many tactics to keep an eye out for.
And whenever the evaluation is around equal, guys, like whatever it's right in the middle of the board, 0.00, but one side is down an entire pawn, it means that the other side has exactly enough compensation for the game to be level. And in positions like that, usually you want to be the side down a pawn. If the game is equal, but you're down a pawn, it means you probably have a great position. And I'm a huge fan of the d5 punch in and then loosen up that f5 knight and get like a rook f3, rook takes f6, and you can immediately get these like super dangerous checkmating ideas.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I like queen c2, just keeping an eye on the a4 pawn. Why did black play the queen d8? Sure, rook d8 can happen, but also that pawn was under attack. Bishop a3 is an idea because that rook on f8 isn't so happy there. And b5 by Lars. I think bishop a3 will be met by knight d6, and looks like black can hold on to the material for now. Although then
Yeah, and
there's
even still, it looks like the type of position where even if bishop a3 won the rook, you'd almost be unhappy to do it because you see a position like this, and all you want to do is go rook f3, d5, sack for something on the king side here. And I actually think the move b5 by Lars is very resourceful, a very strong move. Like if that gets taken twice, the reason that Roberto is thinking so long, I'll just show you. Let's say we capture everything. That square on d5 is what it's all about. And I wouldn't be surprised if knight d5 first instead of queen b5 was playable, but you get the idea. The knight
right.
sinks in, and that bishop on b2, Robert, is not participating anymore.
And Roberto did play bishop a3, so we have similar names, and he goes. Well, we actually have the same name, just from different places. And so bishop a3 played. The rook on f8 is in trouble, and he just takes back on c4 after Lars took. So the d5 square is black's. However, you have to sit passively for the time being, and there's that first rook lift. And don't be surprised if the second one joins the party with rook d3 and swinging over to f3 or g3.
Probably one of the funniest things that I see in chess is when you double rook lift and then somebody threatens back rank mate. It's like, wait, I can't get out of it. My rooks are blocking my two pawns. So that's the one thing to watch out for when you double rook lift, is that a simple back rank threat can sometimes just be like force mate.
That's true. And I'm not sure you actually have anywhere to go with that second rook. Perhaps one rook can do the job, and bishop c1 at some point comes to mind. I like knight e5, bringing your piece back towards the enemy king. And I was saying bishop c1 to sacrifice an h6, but if I move bishop c1, then the knight frees up from e7. So it's such a tricky position where black has an extra pawn, white has the current initiative. But if you're not quick, it feels like black is able to get out of this and claim an advantage, not just a decent position.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the move f6 now that it's available. The knight moved out of the way. F6 kicks the knight on e5 out. It also opens up, just generally speaking, another avenue for the black queen. Maybe queen g6, especially if bishop c1 would be a consideration.
Agreed. F6, such a difficult move for newer players, less experienced players to go for because they're told never to push in front of their king. But then knight e5 is just frustrating black. And if that queen can get to g6, as you mentioned, or the rook up to f7 to help defend, it brings in more resources for the black king. So right now, this is the tough question, Aman, where to go, because white's pieces seem pretty optimally placed. Perhaps the rook on d1 would like to go up to g3, but you were just talking about how that could lead to a back rank checkmate. That you, for example, actually rook d3, rook b8, there's already threats of queen takes a4 in the near future because of this very back rank checkmate. So
I'll actually show that. That's a good point. If you swing the rooks over there, queen takes a4, as Robert pointed out. This is exactly what I was talking about. These rooks make it so that the king can't escape. It's like a suffocation.
Yeah, you can't go all in. And well, Roberto plays rook g3 and Lars plays f6. So we're right on the mark. Aman and knight g4, I think the threat is clear. Knight takes h6. Maybe you'll blunder that. And if the knight moves from e7, the rook on f8 is under attack. So not that easy to make a move. And he just says, I'm cool. Let's slide the king to h8. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah, now knight f5 is not quite possible because bishop takes f8 followed by bishop takes g7 with a check. Knight takes h6 though, threat renewed. And like I just pointed out, knight f5 is not exactly possible. So
maybe your queen h5 type of move where you use the fact that the queen is opened up, but there could even be a knight takes h6 there, like giving up the knight to play rook h3 after.
right.
There are a bunch of tactics to figure out. Thankfully for Lars, he has a lot of time, 2 minutes 26 seconds, and just plays rook f7. Look at that.
Knight f5 is such a big threat now that the pin has been removed from the game. Wow, knight f5 is so tough to deal with.
And now knight f5 for sure is about to happen.
Has to.
Well, he's thinking, which means he might take that pawn on a4, which I wasn't even looking at until he started thinking. Like, why could he be thinking here? Now he plays knight f5, and now he'll take on a4.
I think so. Now, e6 falls, but
d4 is hanging.
Ooh, everything falls. Yeah, the thing is the attack. White is kind of like queenside, bishop, kingside, knight. Rooks are like half in the middle, half attacking. Every piece is kind of doing a different thing in this position, Robert. So yeah, queen a4, as you mentioned, queen takes d4. It feels like White's game falls apart here, especially with 20 seconds.
Great response to the bishop c5 and queen d7, quickly dropping that back. I just don't see how White can attack the knight on f5. The problem for White, in part, is you need a pawn and a knight on g4 at the same time. You need to kick this knight out of f5, and you can't do it. So rook a3, probably a good positional move, just trying to double and attack that pawn on a6. And maybe that's what Roberto needs to do, is give up on the attack and just go for that pawn.
Mm-hmm. We're going to see at some point, like, an h3, just a move from Roberto. If he doesn't have a move, he's probably just going to throw that in. Knight e3 looking to trade. A6 pawn being pressured. I think Roberto's doing a good job with 10 seconds, but Lars has the advantage here, no doubt.
And nice quick reply there after knight f4 threatening mates on g2. Just f3 blocking the queen. And now this a6 pawn, that's falling, right? Queen d3. And if you lose that pawn, your king isn't perfectly safe, and you only have one extra pawn for black. So I actually think that Roberto is doing a really amazing job at fending off the immediate threats and then trying to, honestly, Aman, what I guess I want to say is changing from aggressive plans to defensive. That's a really hard switch to turn on, and he did that mid-game with no time on his clock.
Agree. And queen e4, he might even be looking for more here.
Just forcing the queen trade, taking a6 next, and knight e2 check. Look at that, king f2. Just making sure you don't drop the d4 pawn.
Very, very quick. Now a6 drops. One thing to watch out for is maybe knight d3. Black is still up a pawn, which is why his position is still favored here. And wow, look at that. Look at that. How quick was that sequence? And I think that's a fantastic find by Lars. Super impressive.
It really is. Now d6 is falling, so black is going up 2 pawns. The e4 pawn, light square. You have a dark square bishop. Not going to be easy to defend that one after a knight g5 kind of sequence. This should be winning objectively for Lars and on the clock as well.
c4, great follow-up move, and you'll find that the pieces just invade here. Knight g5 is pretty much the end of the game, taking the e-pawn, and I think he sees that now. Same idea.
Does. And we'll actually get one more game in this time control when this one concludes. And for Lars, he has the momentum. For Roberto, he played really well at the start of this match, and he's playing well. It's not like that's the problem. It's just he got down on the clock, and he was down a pawn, and he couldn't quite figure out how to proceed.
And Lars came right back in this match. It's actually been rook d4, maybe just trade. Okay,
I like rook d4. There it is.
Yeah. But this has been a big comeback from Lars since the break. Robert, he basically came out of the break a different person.
He's improved. I don't want to say new, but definitely the improved compared to the first 4 games of the match. So Lars is ready to go. And this is a bad sign for fans of Roberto Molina because we know how strong Lars is in bullet. Roberto also very strong, but in the history, in the first 2 rounds of this tournament, I think Lars is like a 15-5 score, something like that, something crazy. But it is 3.5, 3.5, tied match. We have another Caro-Kann. This will be the final game of the 5-minute time control. And Aman, do you expect to see some kind of crazy position like we just saw 2 games ago?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Here it is.
I think Lars is not going to change a line where he had like, and let's be clear, Lars saw those checkmates at the end of that last game. He just didn't get a chance to play them because his opponent flagged. So if you have a game like that, trust me, there's a part of your brain that says, I'll just repeat it and we'll play the exact same game and I'll checkmate him this time. He's going to go back to those positions because look how well they worked.
It's no longer a choice. You just have to do it. Wait, Queen H6. See, Bishop F8. We just saw that position.
He's just checking. Maybe he might actually just take a draw. Why not? He's made a big comeback already. I think he probably evaluates his bullet chances as pretty good.
Wow. Okay. Well, he takes the draw by repetition, and I like that decision for both of them. For Roberto, you score half point after 2 consecutive defeats. For Lars, you can say, wait a sec, I know what I did landed me a victory, a smashing victory with a checkmate, but perhaps there's a flaw in here. And to have the self-awareness to question your decision, say, I won, but that looked a bit sketchy. Let me actually go look that up. I think for both players, this was a very mature moment.
Yeah, I think that Roberto doesn't have as much of a choice being black. And also after Queen H6, you sort of have to bring the bishop back. So I think this was an interesting decision, but I don't think it's that crazy. As I said, Lars scores a lot of his points in the bullet portion. You can't forget Roberto has like a crazy high bullet rating. Like I'm pretty sure he came in at like 2850 or something ridiculous last time. So do not think that this is like a Lars gets the bullet and wins the match type of thing. But it's just that's where he has gotten his points in the past. So it looks as though he's comfortable with the draw, get to the next portion, and get to the bullet.
Probably the best Lars has done in the first time control. With that, it's in the books. We will take a break, and when we come back, we'll come back for more of this 4-4 matchup between Lars Oskar Hauge and Roberto Molina. And we are back, ready for more from Roberto and Lars. Aman, 4-4 score. Lars has the momentum. He's won a few of the last, I think, two and a half of the last three games to even this matchup. Who do you think is happier that the break just took place?
It's a good question. It's sort of funny because we don't see a lot of breaks happen right after a peaceful result like that. It seemed like both guys were actually pretty reasonably happy to go to break. But obviously, I think Lars is going to be very, very happy in general to be done with the 5 minute portion. I think when the time control gets shorter, his style gets better. In that, he likes to go for these speculative sacks and slightly dubious openings. And I'm here for it. I think it's a great style, especially in online chess. And I think it works better when your opponent has less time to sort of calculate everything out and figure out exactly what you're up to.
And we're back in the games here. Oh, an E3. We're not getting the Vienna with E4. We need to get in the title of this opening, right? Three knights, Vienna, quiet variation. So
quiet variation.
I think we know who chose that one, and it is Roberto once again. And by the way, I looked up their bullet ratings during the break. Lars is 2820 bullet. Roberto is 2801 or something like that. So they are about even in terms of bullet. So it's going to be a tight matchup till the very end.
Yeah, it is going to be a heavyweight matchup in the bullet portion. Right now, though, we've got the 3+1 section. So I would say a time control that the players always feel a little bit more comfortable with. There's still that +1, Robert, but 3 minutes is what everyone is used to playing online.
That's true for sure. And it's what everyone plays. And the increment makes a difference. It allows players who make flag in other circumstances, gives them some time to build. And here, Lars plays for E5. So Roberto got an E4 but after dropping his bishop back to D3, and Lars plays E5. And to my eyes, D5 is the natural response. Try to keep that bishop on B7 locked in. That bishop on C1 can go to G5 in the near future. I think that White's spatial advantage is not to be taken for granted. But what do you think Lars anticipates from this? And he wants to blockade the D pawn first, but I still like White.
Yeah, White's position looks good. It's that bishop on B7 because especially in this position, there's a little bit of a different dynamic that you have to watch that A pawn. So you can't just bring the bishop back to C8 and reroute it to another diagonal like you normally would. And if you play A5, you're giving up a lot of light squares in your position. So I understand Lars is coming with the knight to D6. He's going for the trades, but very simply, you can pile up pressure on the C file here for White and maybe even go for something like A5, bring the rook to C1, slow gameplay. Knight H4 into F5 is another idea to try to play on both sides of the board. But I echo what you're saying here. This looks very comfortable for Roberto right out of the gate.
It's funny, you just mentioned A5, and I was thinking how both players probably want to play that. And now Black can play A5, which means that there's no pawn hanging on the square. The downside of playing A5, you give up control of the light square. So knight D6 first. But once again, I know White went rook A1 to B1, but I do believe that A5 still is a pretty promising move from White's point of view.
Yeah, if you wait and play B4 first, for example, there might follow bishop E3 and then maybe A5 from Black as an option, just to take control of all those dark squares on the queen side.
We're definitely going to see that. After the trade, I don't see another appealing move besides A5. Gives you the C5 square for your knight, allows your rook on A8 to be more active. And if White plays B5 after Black plays A5, you shut down the queen side, and it's Black who controls the pawn breaks on the other side of the board. So Lars does play A5. Taking makes sense. He can bring a rook to C1 for Roberto. He plays bishop B5, but knight C5 would be my very quick response. I think this position's easier to play for Black. What do you think, Aman?
Yep, agreed. Not a big fan of the B4 move for White. So that's what I would have omitted going forward if I was playing the position. But knight D2, he's swinging that knight over, whether it's to B3 or C4. I think that Lars has a very easy game, though. He can slide the rook to A8 from F8. He can now, we talked about that bishop couldn't move earlier. Now there's no A6 pawn. Well, look at that move. Bishop A6. There's also bishop C8 to D7. Same idea.
It's funny. I knew you were about to say bishop a6 because you said he could now, and then he made the move. So I knew you were saying it before he played it. And that bishop can even come to d3, plant that bishop there. The e4 pawn starts feeling a bit uncomfortable. The rook on a5 is actually a strong piece. That knight on d6, if you're not careful, will hop into c4 if you move that knight from d2. So I think bishop d3 and maybe an f5 to follow, breaking open the king side. Instead, Lars plays g6, a bit of a quieter move. And now knight b3, we mentioned this idea for white. So I thought that you need to be a bit quicker for Lars. And, well, Roberto's saying maybe neither of us need to move too quickly.
Well, it's the quiet variation, Robert. Both players are echoing that here with g6, f3, just some slow building moves. f5 by Lars definitely wants to happen. And that bishop on c6, not to be underestimated because it stops both rooks from going to a8. So if the action is on the king side, it stops black's rook from joining by a8, and moving over to the king side. And if the action's on the queen side, the rook on f8 can't join. So it's like a kind of a funny piece here, but it disconnects both of the rooks very effectively.
And on the flip side of things, it actually blocks white's access to the c file. You want to play rook c1 and pile up against this backward c7 pawn, but your bishop is stuck there. So it's funny that both sides are happy and unhappy about the bishop's placement. But look at this. The board is opening up. Queen f2 necessary because otherwise queen c5 would be a check that picks up the knight on c3. I would still consider queen c5 to get into an endgame. But then again, there would be a knight e4 to follow, maybe a punch through with d5 to d6, and the b6 pawn gets weak. So rook c5 does make sense, although knight e4, a kind of natural response attacking the rook.
Yeah, it has to be the immediate response. Basically, his rook on a5 was not doing anything. Had to activate it, decided, look, you can have knight e4 with tempo. I want my rook doing something off the a5 square. And wow.
Whoa.
Tactics coming out here. Knight g3 to e2 or knight d4 to e2.
Okay, so knight g3 to e2 coming our way, but white's position looks pretty good. I'd put my queen on e3 just to cover all the dark squares around the white king. King will go to h2 after knight e2 check. And isn't white's position better because the pawn on c7 is the easiest one to target? Not easy, but easiest, relatively speaking.
Yep, I definitely feel that way. This c7 pawn is going to be a big issue. I'm not sure if Lars is properly estimating that because queen c3 is coming up after bishop b7.
And the problem is that if you think you're trading e4 for c7, the c7 pawn is more important because the d5 pawn is passed, the b6 pawn becomes weak. And maybe, okay, rook c6, he leads with the rook. That way when queen c3 happens, you take on c7 and pin the black queen to the right. And queen c1 is possible here, for example. That rook is pinned. Oh my gosh, the bishop's just hanging on c8. Nice. Nice find.
And there's no queen g3. There's no discovered checks, discovered anything with that rook. It might be bishop takes h3 just because you have to do something.
Desperate times, desperate measure. And he plays it. Can you takes with the queen.
Queen
f4 check. So you have to be careful about that. And 10 seconds. So how do you deal with that?
Maybe just rook. Ooh.
No, queen d4 is not even a threat because the bishop on b5 covers f1. So you could actually play d7.
Yeah.
Plays king g1. Okay.
That move makes a lot of sense.
Queen f. Look at this defense, though. Great defense covering d1, threatening queen f8, check and mate to queen f8.
Yeah.
Oh,
rook
went the wrong way. Okay, it's still very good for white, but he went the wrong way there.
Rook d8 is a great move. There's rook d1.
Okay, bishop f1 only move. Found it.
It's a big move.
Ooh.
Rook b4.
Bishop b5. Just win that b6 pawn and push the a pawn.
King to f4 though. King to g3. Sometimes the bishop and pawn can be a little clumsy, but rook a1 is huge. Huge.
This is so Roberto, right? Putting all of his pieces in defensive before he goes in the offensive. And look at this. The pawn's on a7. Here comes the bishop. Although, how does the bishop get in? You put it back on b5 and go to c6. It's almost
He's going to go rook c8, yeah.
Oh, rook c1, e2.
Oh my god.
E2.
Oh my goodness, e2.
Oh, it's a huge blunder. And you don't go rook a1.
Rook a1.
Oh my gosh. Oh, good move though, queen.
Take on f1.
And then rook takes, and rook b1. You get rook check on the third rank. Wow, this might be a draw somehow.
I think it's a draw.
What a game. What a match this has been. Yeah, this is a draw for sure.
Yeah, with the g-pawn, you just leave the king on g1. And
this is why you learn your end games, everyone. You can do the first rank defense with the g-pawn because the rook, if it goes e2 to h2, there's no way in. Look at Roberto. Oh my. Both of them.
Nobody's happy with that result.
No. And what a game. Roberto had the win. Lars turned the tables by finding just tricky move after tricky move, bringing that king into G3, threatening mate. And I think the problem was Roberto got too cautious when he could have gone for a checkmate or just pushed his pawn immediately instead of bringing his rook and his bishop back. And I get why he did that. It just did not pay out for him in that game.
Yeah, there's always going to be these moments where a certain style is going to be better at executing a game. There's lots of cases where, the more solid approach, and I can relate to this because that's my approach. I'm always the no counterplay type of guy, but sometimes you have to make that, important decision to allow a little bit of counterplay, but you forcefully calculate your way home.
Sorry, I was listening to you, but what is this position?
Yeah, good question, honestly.
You were making a very good point, and I'm listening to you, taking it in, and I agree with you that people believe that playing risk-free chess is the safest, right? Playing super solid, but sometimes it's actually the riskiest way to play, and the position may call for tactics. What is happening here? What is this?
I think I was trying to mask how weird the position was with a sort of mundane statement, like, yeah, so people just try to do it. It's like, let's just glaze past this opening phase. Maybe no one will notice that there was a bishop h6, knight h6 played by Roberto.
And then h4, h5, and a g5 played as a response. And hey, guess what? Queen trade being offered. And no, see, this is interesting because Roberto would have probably played like knight g1 to e2 to leave the queen trade on the table or something like that. And Lars has no queen trade. And now e5 happens. And that's the thing is you keep the queens on the board and you don't actually maintain what advantage the engine evaluations seem to give white because black has this really strong center.
Yeah, knight e2 traps the bishop.
Right?
Knight f3 allows a fork. So he has to play this weird move, bishop e2.
And
not what you want.
The black king has not moved, right? So you can still castle kingside if you want. Not sure you want to do that. And white can technically castle queenside. Not sure you want to do that either. So I do not know where the kings are going. And queen g3 check here. There's knight f2. The e3 square is defended by both the knight and the queen, so you don't actually land a knockout there. Although it's just good to put your queen in white's camp. I think bishop e6, just defend your d5 pawn. Makes sense now. I just am confused as to what's about to happen.
We don't know where the kings are going. We don't know if the kings are going. We don't know anything. The black king is so exposed. There's only short castle. I have a feeling it might stay in the center. However, you can short castle as long as you do not take that g pawn. Taking that g pawn here and short castling, very bad combo. Well, it looks like we learned a bit more information about white's position as well. He will not be long castling.
And look at how quickly Roberto responded. He had that lined up. He expected rook a6. And that's what happens over a long match is you come to be familiar with your opponent's style and the moves they might play. So you essentially can pre-move much better as the match goes on. And okay, queens are off. Both kings are safer. I won't say safe because there's still a lot of open space in front of them. And knight g4. So trying to distract the pieces from the c6 square and just from the queen side more generally.
Yeah, understandable. I wonder which piece he's going to take with. I can see a case for both of them here. Bishop takes g4, has the idea of bishop e6 to follow up.
The only downside of bishop g4 would be given the d3 square with check, and then maybe a rook f2 to follow. So
ooh, that's a good point.
Goes in this move order, and bishop e6 probably is too greedy because of knight d. Oh, he goes for it. Maybe it's not, but I thought knight d3 check.
Wait, the king gets up to e3.
Wait, how though? Knight d3. I'm gonna play rook d8 next. I just pin your bishop. Rook d8. Rook b.
Yeah,
rook.
And there's no king e2 because of knight f4.
Yeah, rook b d8. That's it. Oh,
that is not even good at all. Bishop takes e4 now.
White's
doing well.
Miss. That's a huge miss.
Yep.
And the king on e3 is not happy though. I'm confused, man. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Well,
hard.
Chess is hard.
True. I
c8.
think that black is doing fine here. The knight on b2 looks weird, but the pawn c3 is under attack. What's white's best move now, though?
I have a feeling this is the type of position that if someone's going to end up on top, it's probably going to be white. This h pawn in an endgame can be very annoying, getting to h6, some back rank issues. Bishop takes e4, played rook c3 and king d2. So the bishop on e4 is great. It can coordinate with this rook, like rook h6 or rook a7, which is exactly why rook c7 was played. And do not blunder rook b6 attacking the pawn, knight c4. Oops.
I actually think that White's position is. Look at 20 seconds, by the way. I didn't even look at the clock. Black has a good chance here because White's king is in worse immediate shape, and there's 20 seconds for Lars.
Yeah, and those rooks are starting to staircase together.
Right, like rook e7. The king will run away f2 and maybe castle at long last to g1, but it was a long trek.
A beautiful journey, though, king to g1. And I think White's position is starting to get pretty good. Like the rook b6 move can now happen. h6 is one of those annoying pawns you throw up the board, and that black king is never really able to join the fight.
Yeah, h6 would be a nuisance to deal with. Probably need to bring your knight back. That knight on d1, it's reached the other side. It doesn't get a promotion. So let's just bring it back with some kind of knight c3 with tempo, or maybe knight e3, just creating some threats. And does choose knight c3.
Bishop f3, very solid, covering all the squares the knight could move to. Of course, it's an option to take that, but I think Lars is looking for a little bit more here.
He is. And what about rook b8 and then pushing that b pawn? Can I get away with that? He pushes it first, but I thought rook
Not
b6 would. Yeah, I thought this. I guess he pushes the b3
and. I think a rook on b8 here would be amazing for Roberto. And h6, he wants that pawn there. Very annoying. Rook b7, starting to be some threats.
Although it looks like black is able to just put a rook on d7 to fend off that attack on the h7 pawn, and here maybe even throw in king g8 at some point, but I understand leaving the king in the corner, just no checks available.
Is there rook takes d4 as an option here? I don't know if it's good enough. You get the h7 pawn, but remember the g pawn and the h pawn are so disconnected, it might not be good enough.
Well, look at this. In comes the knight around here with the b3 pawn about to be lost. You don't want to lose that pawn, that's for sure. And you have no choice now.
I think you have to go knight d4 and trade the knight for bishop and just maybe draw the endgame, but now this is getting risky. There's no knight g4 check.
No. And I could see a stalemate, by the way. The king has no moves.
Wait, knight f1.
Knight f1 and then knight g3.
Yeah, and rook d3 if king h3.
Oh, gosh. And rook d3?
That was the worst blunder, I think.
Wait, the b3 bishop is hanging as well. And then rook d5 or something like that.
Maybe knight g3 now.
Wow.
You're hitting everything. That's a good response.
Take d3. If you take d3, rook e5, and there's knight d, knight f6, and then knight
f6.
g8. Go knight g8. I get the feeling this is probably a draw, but it's a really weird position.
Yeah, because the pawn gets to g5, and
now
the knight can't move. Now it's a dead draw.
Yeah, rook e8. Just pin the knight and no moves.
Yeah.
It's funny. Black can just give up the rook and it's stalemate.
That is worth doing.
I would take on g5.
I would take on g5.
And who
now he's going to do it with check? No.
I wonder if he's actually trying to play for a win because he's up a piece. But obviously, you can't move the knight.
It's actually impossible.
Yeah, give up the rook.
All three of these things over here, h pawn, king h8, knight g8, they cannot move. Not a single one of them. So, no fun.
Yeah.
Boo.
We have a lot of respect for the players. They're playing a great match. But come on, if you're going to make a draw, don't do it by repetition. Give us the stalemate we've all been hoping for. And you see the players on screen, Roberto thinking, what could have been? Where did I go wrong? Lars just still looking really with intensity at the screen. And Roberto actually seems very upset right now.
Yeah, I think he's just experiencing that expected emotion after so many of these games seem to end in draws, or Lars was down to like 10, 12 seconds in this match, and he had almost 2 minutes, and he's just not converting them. So I think he's just got high standards for himself, and he knows in this match that every point is going to count. It's a tied match, as we have the break here in the 3+1 portion, and it could come down to a single game, and then you're going to start to really reflect on the matches, which he's probably thinking about right now.
For sure. He had that knight d3 check and maybe that rook d8 pinning the bishop. I'm sure he's thinking about that tactical sequence. But all in all, it was a well fought game. There have been ups and downs, trials and tribulations, errors and brilliancies. But we are going to take a break. When we return, we'll come back with the second half of the 3 minute plus 1 second increment time control of this Roberto Lars I'm Not GM Speed Chess Championship match brought to you by Chess.com. We just want to remind everybody of the format for these matches. There are 75 minutes of the longest time control. You've already been here. You know about all of that. We're about midway through the 3+1 time control. We'll get to bullet. But right now, we're so locked up with such an even match. We want to remind everyone of the tie break format that if this match ends as a tie, we get to a situation where they play mini matches, 4 games of 1+1. And if it's still tied, we get Armageddon. Amon, you and I, we don't root for players. We don't really root for results. But how exciting would it be to get all the way to Armageddon?
Well, you know, I don't even have to imagine how exciting it would be because we've already experienced craziness in tiebreaks. Like we had the tiebreak between Eric Rosen and Levy Rosman, and I don't think we quite made it to Armageddon. But based on how thrilling it was to even play those mini matches and extra games with all the pressure, I think that Armageddon would just be a treat.
Yeah, it would be absolutely electric. And right now we have another Vienna quiet variation. We've come to
There it is.
expect this. And Roberto did have a very nice position 2 games ago. So he's going back to this. Lars has felt at home in this variation. It does give Black a good degree of flexibility with the minor pieces, but White can control the center. So who do you think is going to blink first? We're going to see this all match?
Yeah, I guess the question is, and it's just been answered, are we going to see Bishop D3 again from Roberto? I think that this was a great opening for him, but I don't think that he proceeded in maybe the most accurate way. So E4, E5 was their previous game, and I think that's repeatable for Roberto. But obviously Lars, he had a great position. He doesn't mind repeating either.
And I wonder what the players did during the break, because sometimes you look at chess, I need to improve my opening, figure out where I could get a bigger advantage or save myself when I got in trouble. Other times, I just can't look at chess anymore. I'm in the middle of a heated match, and Bishop D2 was played. We saw Bishop E1 type of ideas in the first game of the match. It was the first game overall, if I'm not mistaken. And so here's Bishop E1 once again.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like he's combining his 2 ideas from both games. That previously he had Bishop D3 and E4, and in the first game he had Bishop C4 with Bishop E1, and then Black took on D4. And here I think he's probably going to take with the pawn and play the game the exact same ways he did before. But we look at what Lars has done differently. He did not play Rook D8 and then go back to E8. He can get Knight D5 because there's no bishop on C4. So there's a few things that are a little bit different here, Robert.
That's right. And also Bishop A6, it seems like, hey, wait a sec, that pawn's still hanging. There could be a bishop takes F3, which would force you to take with the G pawn, not very good. Or there's Bishop B3 to go win your A pawn. So it's not that simple here for White to figure out this position. You should probably not take on A6. I wouldn't go for that. I'd play something calmer like Bishop C3. That feels like a Roberto move. Hey, let's trade on my terms if we're going to trade darks for bishops.
Right. Well, we're in the quiet variation, and Rook A1 is totally a quiet-looking move. That's dealing with your Bishop B3 idea of forking those 2 pawns. And if A5 happens to save the A pawn here for Lars, it gives up the B5 square, and that's a square that White can pretty permanently look to occupy.
And look at Lars go. Look at the D file. There are minor pieces on D7, D6, and D5 staring at White's king side. Bishop C3, that's an isolated pawn. So you're just staring into your own pawn. Bad bishops defend good pawns, so they say. So I think that both sides are just trying to figure out how to proceed from here. I like Black's position, though.
Yeah, agreed. Looks like there's going to be easy play for both sides here in terms of where the pieces go. Knight E5, that's an automatic looking move. Get in the middle of the board. And now that A pawn, it's something to think about. Bishop takes A6. Now a lot more of an idea because the queen can no longer come to G5 after the knight F6 move, and the knight is no longer on F3, so there's no bishop takes F3. Bishop takes A6.
Yeah, you just said it. I think Queen B7 was a good move for Black, defending A6 and attacking G2. Bishop A6, he grabs it. I'm trying to read Lars's expressions. He's just eating. So I can't tell how he feels. And he has the best poker face ever because he's always astonished, right? You said bewildered. And okay, now I think we're getting a little bit of a tell from him. I don't think he's very happy that he dropped the A6 pawn. But for the most part, he does not react.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it almost looks like, so Roberto Molina is probably shaking his leg because he's nervous, but it looks like he's in a massage chair.
Yeah, he's got one of those nice gaming chairs that could double as a massage
Like
chair.
it's shaking behind him.
Yeah, maybe actually it is a massage chair. That would be pretty cool and probably helpful. But I think you're right that both players just trying to figure out the position. We saw a trade there on e5, and now
Yeah.
white has the bishop pair. So I think that bishop e1 retreat. You can play bishop d4 as well if you want to be more active, but bishop e1 feels like the Roberto move. And instead, he just allows his bishop to be captured, saying, "I'm up a pawn. Don't mind liquidation."
Yeah. Takes. Pawn is going to get to c4. Bishop's kicked out. Extra pawn. He's going to take it slow. And Lars, you got to chalk that up to just a blunder. Completely overlooked his a pawn, and that's the difference in the position right now.
Yeah, that was not a sacrifice. Sometimes it may be a dubious sacrifice, but we all make those. That was just a blunder, not recognizing that that pawn could finally be captured. By the way, 18 seconds and counting down for black. So it's a difficult position down a pawn, and you're down under 20 seconds. But somehow Lars, when he's in time trouble, he's the one who almost plays better. So something about this match so far, Lars has been able to handle the time trouble. But right now, rook d4, push one of these pawns, take over the d file. This can't be good.
No, not at all. Rook d6, however.
Rook d1.
Yeah,
follow.
rook b6, rook d2 is not the direction you want to take this position.
No, that bishop on b5 just keeps control over the board. Take with a pawn. I'd play rook d4. Just give me king f2. The rook on a8 is useless right now.
Yeah, the bishop on b5 sort of anchored by and anchors these pawns. So it's like a nice trio that keeps the rook out of the A, B, and C files.
And look what Roberto's doing. I didn't like that move. I thought he was going his king to b4. I thought, and he's bringing his king up this side of the board. But I thought that king d1 move was a bit slow, but maybe it wasn't, and he's just figuring this one out.
Yeah, he's at least on the same page. It's going to be a5 because, hang on, that rook comes down to c1, and Lars is going to be annoying. It's going to be annoying here.
Very. And how does white proceed? Because you're up a pawn, but the rook covers the b pawn. The black king, of course, keeps the d6 pawn in place. The rook went to b7. That loses a vital tempo.
Yep. I think just can't you take the pawn now?
Then rook d2 check. then you go b7.
That's funny.
So what here? Rook b4 to c4? Something like that? Look at this.
And king b7.
Wow, king
okay,
c6.
Now the king gets over. King d7 is a try here? No, that's is lost.
Yeah, and that's endgame technique for you by Roberto and Lars, hoping for some pre-moves, but Roberto's 50 seconds left. This is just an easy win at this point. And with 20 minutes left in the 3-minute portion, Roberto takes a lead once again. He started off the match up 3-1. Then Lars came fighting right back, tied the match up. It's been tied for a while. Now a 1-point lead for Roberto.
Yeah, let's see if Lars can bounce back and tie this match up again. He has changed his opening against Roberto's Caro-Kann. So he's going e4, c4, and we're actually getting a position very similar to the position that Roberto gets as white. So we've seen this before. For example, knight back, we've seen this exact thing. These guys clearly have positions that they like. And look at this, because he's playing with the black pieces, not the white pieces, he doesn't get to play bishop a6, aka bishop a3.
That's a really good point. And is honestly just the same position, colors reversed, but a tempo ahead for white. That's how these things work. And right now, the position looks very nice for Lars. It's his style of position. And Roberto needs to be careful. So knight a5, a great move, trying to keep the d5 square defended and plugged. You just want to make sure that the e6 pawn feels safe. Sometimes there are sacrifices on that square, ripping the king open. And Roberto doing well on the clock. Lars keeping pace. I think that for now, I like white's attacking chances. But as the game continues and the isolated pawn remains, I would favor black in any potential endgame.
And look out for knight takes f7. Just generally speaking. For example,
right
here,
now.
knight takes f7.
I think knight takes f7 was it.
I think it was winning.
I think it was it.
I was about to say, if there's ever a move where the knight leaves that square, knight captures f7, we're hitting the queen, bishop takes e6 follows. For example, king takes, well, bishop takes e6, and you're going to get mated in a couple moves here. There's no question about that. Plus, you don't even have to find mate. You can just play b takes c3 after, and it's game over.
Yeah, that was that's a pre-move. Let me check the time. He did not pre-move it. He spent 1.4 seconds, but he is going to regret that.
Yeah.
He must see that he had the opportunity to sack the piece, go for the e6 pawn. And now after bishop f6, the rook on e8 defends the e6 pawn, so sacrifices may be in the air later in the game. Certainly not the case now. And I would but c4. No, this is turning, I would say, in black's favor.
No, this is not right for sure, because that b pawn, c pawn, all loose. Normally, you want the pawn on c3, not c4. Number one, it guards d4, supports the center. Number two, that bishop on
mate on
e2,
g2.
checkmate.
They put a mate one, and Lars just laughs at himself. Oh my goodness! Oh my gosh!
So Lars blundered the mate. And then Lars is laughing, and Roberto is like stressed. He's like grabbing, he's pulling his hair out. It's like, dude, you just mated the guy.
Oh gosh, well, that was something. And Lars may kick himself about missing the knight takes f7. He just allowed checkmate in one move. And we know that pain. We've all blundered these kind of checkmates, and we're like, oh, how could we jolt back? But for Lars at this point, you've lost 2 games in a row. You need to really gather your bearings. Just say, I can do this. I was just even. I missed an opportunity. Maybe he doesn't even realize he had knight takes f7 just yet, but I blundered checkmate in one in a perfectly normal looking position. And all right, we're into this next game here. I like Roberto's position once again, the isolated pawn. I don't particularly enjoy playing with it, but something about it is to Lars's liking.
Yeah, and this is, as we said last time, this is a repeat of the exact same position. We've seen this before. Bishop takes e2. It's got to be knight takes e2. I'll just point out the difference here. Queen takes e2. If that was played, then the d4 knight would simply be hanging because of the rook on e8. So you can just go ahead and capture that. That would be a free piece. So, of course, he had to move the knight back. It's not the move he wants to do, but it's the move that was required here. So he's just, he plays bishop takes f6, Robert, and that's a committal decision. He's going to grab that pawn and look to trade pieces.
And greed is not always good, because that rook on d8 can land on the d2 square. But for now, Roberto's claiming it's not a big deal. I can just move my knight back to c3 from a4. The knights on the rim are dim, so let's bring it back to defend a2, defend the knight e2 at the same time. White is up a pawn. And I see people asking to see that checkmate again. We will show it later. We're just in the midst of this game, but don't worry. We will definitely have an instant replay as we head into our next break. So we'll keep that game up, and we'll be able to show it later. But right now, it looks like Lars is in trouble. Once again, he's lost 2 in a row. He's down a pawn. The next move for white, almost pre-movable, is rook f to d1, then king f1, start trading pieces, and you're a pawn ahead.
Absolutely. Knight e5, an idea. I think it just gets met by either king g2 or even f4. Kicking that knight out. I'm not so sure here. This looks like a real extra pawn for Roberto.
It does, and its presence doesn't need to be felt just yet. But if you play f4 and king g2, king f3, just the long-term advantage, not to mention that you have 2 knights as white against a bishop-knight combination. That bishop on a7 will not be able to defend the pawns on b7 and a6. So if a pair of knights gets traded, then white has even more of an advantage to go after some of the pawns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no way you can just trade everything here. It just doesn't work. After takes rook d1, I think we'll see rook c2. I think we almost have to see rook c2. Yeah,
the rook d7, though. You had to do this for black, but this doesn't look very pleasant.
This is terrible. Yeah, rook d7 is a lights out move, but Roberto, I think what he's up to is king e1 and rook c1, like those types of ideas. He wants to force an exchange of rooks.
He could almost trap the rook. Like, if the king could go to d1 right now, if the king and the rook could swap places, king d1, the rook has to go to b2, and the king c1 traps the rook. So you have to be careful if you are Lars not to even lose the rook, but rook c1, as you pointed out, that looks like a pretty good move here.
Yeah, I think kicking the rook out is an achievement, because if you go king e1 now, there's bishop a5, which is quite a frustrating move. So rook c1, and if rook b2, Then I think you could go rook b1 and king e1.
Oh, there's actually a rook b2 because the bishop's on b6. There's knight a4.
Ooh, even better.
So
That's an easy thing to forget that you just brought your bishop there. That would be a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I actually only just thought about it because like, oh well, what's the difference in the rook moves? And then the bishop just came there, so it would be a mistake. And now rook d6. I like that move. Your rook can go to h6 if white is not careful to win this h2 pawn. And for Roberto right now, king f1 back, but you just want king e1 to kick the rook out, so you probably don't feel great about making this move.
No, you definitely don't. Rook d2 back, and he says, all right, well, what are we doing here?
We're just doing a little bit of a tango. I think knight g3 to e4 makes a lot of sense. And he plays rook d1. So we've seen this position before.
Hey, he's got to be careful. Rook c1 is that 3 times? Yeah. I think rook c1, rook d2 should be 3-time repetition here.
It just was done in a weird order. Although,
yeah, I'm trying to check.
Yeah, f4 was thrown in there.
Yeah, f4 and bishop b6. So there were a bunch of moves thrown in, actually.
And wow, knight e4, allowing the rook to take a2 because knight d6 check picks up b7. Interesting moment here. And honestly,
b7 doesn't seem like a great pawn to take.
But king e7, there's knight c8. So do not play king e7.
Ah, very easy to miss.
Oh, he played it!
It's so easy to miss.
Knight c8 really check. Does Roberto see it? Oh, he's staring at the board.
He's getting
he hasn't moved yet. He must see it if he's staring at the board like this.
I think he might eventually see it, but I don't think he sees it right now.
Because he would play it instantly if you. He missed it.
He didn't see it.
So I wonder what he was thinking about there. Maybe some kind of knight c3 to d5 if you could bring the other knight in. But both players having a sort of blind spot to this opportunity with the fork.
The reason that he didn't play knight b7 immediately is because he probably felt, that's a weird pawn to take, which is sort of what I was saying. Because I missed knight c8 as well. I was expecting king e7, knight takes b7. I was like, is that good for white? And Roberto's probably thinking the same thing. He did not even consider knight c8. And to be honest, Robert, you're the only one who did of the 4 of us on cam here.
Well, I was looking at knight fork earlier, so I still had in my mind maybe there's a knight fork somewhere. And black is fortunate right now because rook d6 check would pick up that knight. Of course, it doesn't because the rook defends it. Rook d7 check, well, then the king just goes back to e8. Suddenly, it looks like black is the one who can start playing for more if white's not careful, thanks to this outside pass pawn.
Yeah, rook d6, king e7 might see repetition.
I would play a5 from Lars. Just push that pawn. There it goes. And, well, we have a little bullet scramble here, but I guess at the end of the day, there's nothing black can do to get out of this pin except for play king e7. So rook d7, rook d6 is just a fair result.
I think it's a fair draw, considering that Lars, I think by his facial expression, maybe we can ask him later, but I think from his facial expression, he knew there was knight c8 there.
Yeah, I wonder, because he did seem a little disturbed by how that game went. And when Roberto started spending time, I was like, okay, well, he's got to be thinking about something. And I don't know exactly what it was, maybe bringing the other knight into the game or something else, but missed opportunity there for him. And he's still up 2 games, so he should be happy. We see the bishop on a6. And this looks odd to me. I don't typically see games like this, but because you mentioned it earlier, I guess came to expect that Roberto might do something like that.
Yeah, there's no way I would ever look at this position and expect bishop a6 from black. But hey, it's Roberto, and he's done it almost every game so far.
And for Lars, he didn't play bishop d3, bishop c2, bishop b3. This time his bishop went to queen a4, by the way. That's always a problem with the bishop on a6. But queen a4, I guess you have knight a5 to save the day.
Ooh, he wants to do it this way. Takes, and then queen a4. There's knight c6 as a possibility.
A7 pawn probably can be captured if you make some bishop d5 type of move. I guess he's just winning the pawn. And I'm looking now at the eval bar on screen there. It looks like white's position is quite nice.
Yeah, I think... Okay, so he goes bishop d5, queen takes a7. Yeah,
Too soon. Too soon, queen a7. I guess rook a8 would trap the queen, but knight d5 first probably allows you to steal that pawn a7 successfully.
Yep. Yeah, trying to figure out what's wrong with nabbing that pawn. And You know what's funny is we've seen a bunch of positions today. It's making me question my evaluation because there's been a lot of what I would consider pretty free pawns, but the evaluation doesn't ever seem to reflect that. Compensation is strong.
It's the problem with having an isolated pawn is that even if you lose a pawn elsewhere, you'll still have the compensation because that pawn on d4 is a weakness. And Roberto right now is trying to figure out, okay, I should be in this. And Lars spending his time looking at the best way to proceed here. And with the match situation the way it is, with the current dynamics of this board, I think you got to play knight takes d5.
Right. Yeah, especially like that bishop is such a strong piece that if you let it sit there, first of all, you need a good move in like in tow. And also, bishop takes f6, knight d7. Maybe that's what he was thinking of. I'm not too sure. Knight c6 doesn't quite do the job here, so he's going to trade. And yeah, I mean, take a7. Why not?
Looks just good. You're up a pawn. So the key thing here is trying to make sure that you stabilize. You brought the queen back to not allow queen to c2, for example. And I
Yeah.
think queen d1. So he brings the queen all the way back. I'm not sure I would have went to d1 at that point, maybe b3, but the knight on d5, Amana. I've had games like this where I'm like, I should be better. I stole a pawn, and you can never kick the knight out of d5, at least not
Yeah.
easily. So where is, or how great is White's advantage truly?
It's always hard to realize. Rook c8, black owns the open file. The queen's watching f7. It might just throw in a move like h6 or g6 he goes for. And yeah, I mean, this is tough, Robert. b5, b4 is also great counterplay. Knight g4 threatens knight f6. And even if you get into queen endgame, a rook endgame, there's always going to be drawing chances for Roberto.
That's right. I would try to get my queen somehow to h6, but that knight on d5 takes away both e3 and f4. So nope, no can do. Rook coming to c2 at some point is, well, right now, I guess rook c2, rook e2, we get a trade of rooks perhaps, and the outside pass pawn is what's the long-term benefit for white, even if currently the position looks quite nice for black. Like rook c1 check, keep the c file.
Yeah, I like rook c1.
Tactically, I would say black is better here, just you're down a pawn. Like if you put a pawn a7, black is quite a bit better.
Yep.
But
and it's tough because you can't activate your pieces very easily. h4 played. Maybe there was an h4 idea by black there, so he just plays h4 to prevent that. And f7 is the reason why you can't ever bring that queen into the action.
Right. And if you can't bring the queen to the action, then at least white has a bit of time. And well, I don't know where white's pieces should go. Like rook e3 to c3. If I get both moves at once, I'm pretty happy. But
Right.
after rook e3, I always have knight d5. So I'm
Queen
not getting
c1 is the idea.
Oh, so queen c6 probably is a good move for white to try to trade queens and stop that infiltration.
And queen c6 hits the b6 pawn. Tough to do something here. So he's watching the c1 square with that move.
And knight takes g6 is a threat. Well,
There is
actually,
knight
no, it's
d5.
not. Yeah, knight g6, there's queen c6 check, but like there's sometimes where you just move the knight out the way and you can get away with it, but not here. But knight d5 played and you called it. And
now queen b7 maybe?
Yeah, do you have to play f3 after queen b7? That looks...
It's so annoying because queen b7, you can't just play king h1 very easily because the knight could jump anywhere on the board and threaten checkmate on h1.
Right. So here comes
f3 is not... it's a bit yucky.
It looks no good at all. And I guess you don't have too much of a choice. But after queen d3, that you have to trade queens. The rook on b1 was under attack. But you win the d4 pawn. So this has been a pretty hard-fought game to this point, and now black wins the d4 pawn. White has the outside pass pawn potential, but it's even material.
I was going to say, I thought we were going to see another draw with rook e1, rook e2, and rook d1, rook d2.
Yeah, that would be something. And
I think knight c4, knight e3 makes a lot of sense. Okay, there's knight check. He's just going to go back.
Okay, so we could see a repetition, king f6, knight d7. But no, Lars wants more. He plays knight to c4. And
maybe king e2.
Yeah, king e2. I like that. Black should probably go... Well, not now. I was going to say go for g5. But g5 doesn't work as knight e4 check.
Yep.
I like the way
It's
Lars
hard
is doing
to.
this.
I agree. It's hard to explain exactly what's going on to everybody, but a lot of maneuvering. Basically, neither side has a concrete threat, so both sides are trying to improve their pieces and their pawn structures slowly but surely.
And every single pawn move has a consequence. So f5, the knight could come into g5, for example. So you need to be very careful. He does it. He weighs the consequences and goes for it. But look at that knight on g5. It's a very promising square for it.
Yep. E4. He's pushing forward this maybe E3, rook D2 ideas in the position.
Oh, I don't like rook b8. Rook c6 was a more active way of going after the pawn on b6 while
Also
attacking
not
the g6
threatening
pawn.
anything.
No, this could turn in Roberto's favor very quickly. I mean, it already is turning in his favor.
It already is, yeah.
So it's a time scramble. Not much time. And look at that. He went rook b8 and then all the way back to g7 just to go after the pawn he could have attacked to begin with. And rook takes b2 now. The pawn is pushing at some point very
good,
soon.
though. Roberto, he's getting that king involved. That's so dangerous.
Yes.
There's
And
checkmate.
rook to knight f3, only move.
King d3.
Then there's knight. Oh, rook to c3. He gave away the pawn.
Under the pawn.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, no.
And king d2. So you have it. No, you don't have a draw. King c1
King
here.
c1.
And then knight d2 check is. No, knight d2 and rook takes c3.
Oh,
Knight d2, rook takes c3.
Yep.
The fork.
He sees it. He sees it.
Oh. Oh, he didn't
doesn't see it.
And look at you. Roberto saw it. He freaked out. Roberto was like, oh, I'm lucky. Let's keep going. Roberto shaking his head.
Why do they both see the tactic? Well, it's always one of them sees the tactic, never both of them.
Right. The person who is falling for the tactic sees it, and never the person who needs to take advantage of it.
Exactly.
So what's happening here? I mean, there's.
Oh, knight e4 is a big move. He gets out of the pin.
Wait, rook g8.
Wait, rook g8?
Oh, okay. The pins everywhere, forks. I don't know what's going on. 1 second. Barely time for Roberto to get his moves off. Okay.
Rook g4.
Barely got that move in time. Watch out for the pin. Just move your king back.
They both need to move their kings.
This is wild. Oh, wait. That a3 pawn's falling down.
Watch out for knight f6. Rook takes h5.
Okay, so knight f4.
Knight f4. Rook h1.
Gosh. Oh, gosh.
What?
Wait, the rook! The rook! On the rook! Oh, my gosh. And Roberto just hits himself on top of the head.
What's going on? What was that game?
This is the wildest match right now. And both players kind of look like they're in disbelief about what happened there. Lars, won a pawn, then had some opportunities, missed a fork that Roberto saw. And then Roberto was the one of 2 pawns there. Then he lost one. He was losing the second, but instead he dropped his rook.
And White had the option to take that last pawn off the board and instead just kept the rook on for one move, and Black hung the rook. I can't believe it.
That's really smart bullet play by Lars, by the way.
It is.
That rook a6 move. Just saying, oh, wait, your knight's under attack. You forget that your rook is hanging or don't see it on the other side of the board. And Lars has changed his opening. He has played c5 earlier and now rook to e8. So I guess we are back to similar territory as some of the other games when he, instead of starting with rook e8 and he played c5 first, honestly, I'm trying to talk about this game, but look at Roberto, look at Lars. They're probably still thinking about that last game. I'm definitely still really deep in that last game. Yeah. Aman, what to say, man?
Unbelievable stuff. The blunders are everywhere in this match. And as we've been pointing out, it seems that the guy who needs to find the blunder to take advantage of it never finds it. And it's never the same guy. So it's just whoever that person happens to be, they're just not finding it when they need to. But the guy's blundering is always trying to keep that poker face. So, the other guy doesn't look at him on the Zoom call and get any ideas.
Yeah, and during a bullet scramble, mistakes happen like that all the time. So, of course, we're not trying to be overly harsh about the players' chess. And both players have been allowing opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be available. So it's not just, Roberto dropped his rook in that game. Lars is so lucky. No, Lars has also made mistakes that have allowed Roberto. In fact, he blundered checkmate on G2 a couple games ago. So
exactly,
both players are benefiting from mistakes, but they're also putting their opponents in difficult positions, and you have to credit them for that. So right now we have 2 bishops versus a knight bishop pair. The pawn structure better for black in terms of pawn islands, but with the bishop pair, you'd have to imagine that with pawns on both sides of the board, white should be the happier side.
And a very small note is that if black's pawns, I like the move b5 here. I'm a big fan of b5. But if black's pawn on a6 was on a7, his position would be a lot better than it is right now. And he does play b5. I think that's great. Even if c4 gets played, you have the two bishops. The fact that black gets to get rid of all those queenside pawns means that I think, are we going to see in some weird way, I feel like right before every break and right before every halftime break, we've almost seen a draw, like a very peaceful result. These guys, they never go into a break with one of them having just lost like tons of games.
And look at this, just a draw. And actually, there was only one moment that I can think of from this game as soon as they agreed to a draw, which I think we'll see in just a few. Oh, Lars not wanting the draw immediately plays rook to a8. That is funny because rook takes rook would have been an immediate draw. Instead, Lars says, hey, let's play on a little bit. The pawn on e5 perhaps is the most vulnerable pawn on the board.
I agree with them. The main thing is that white's bishop doesn't have a good anchor square because, bishop on d6, suddenly all your kingside pawns are loose. And bishop on e3 can't really guard e5. So he wants to play, or Lars wants to play king f5, attack that pawn. The rook's going to swing down to a3 and a2. It's not winning, but he's going to play a few more moves. There's going to be maybe an h5, h4 idea, and he's going to continue from there.
Yeah, this looks pretty drawn. Yeah, just trade pawns there. If you win e5, you lose g5. And so that's just an even trade. If black could play g4, then you would think about it. But even there, that shouldn't be too much of anything. G4 just take with check. My bishop can drop back to f2 if I need to block the second rank. So this looks like a very clear equal position.
Definitely. Although I understand Lars wanting to play on, it's like, it's almost an ego thing. If you're slightly preferred, you just want to play on and remind the guy. I think he's looking at g4 here. It's not really a big deal, but I'm sure that's the move he's intending.
Yes. Both sides, they know that this game should and most likely will be a draw, but mistakes happen. They have been happening throughout the match. You just have nerves, the tension of playing blitz for so long and just getting into the bullet stage. Of course, Lars wants to even the score. And for Roberto, he's played for a draw in this game from a very early point. So he's just trying to ensure that he goes into bullet with a lead.
And I mean, this is an understandable try. Black has a pass pawn here. The e pawn runs, and basically, if you can stick that bishop on g6 for black, then you stop all of white's pawns from pushing. And yeah, in the meantime, you do have this one. So again, slightly better. Not much, but slightly better. Gotta admit.
We take these advantages, that's for sure. And the g2 pawn hanging, so he goes back bishop f2. I like the way Lars is playing this. Just, you can slowly try to push forward. Maybe
Just
f6.
a little.
Yeah, just play f6, throw that move in. Maybe play e5, try to push that pawn. It should, of course, be a draw. But Lars is the side with the upper hand, especially now after king g5.
Yeah, rook d4, rook.
Oh, rook a2?
Rook a2, king somewhere, g3, g1. But it's getting closer and closer to picking off one of these pawns. Definitely some progress.
That's right. And I'm wondering about like a bishop h4, rook f2, if that just solves all of white's problems immediately.
It looks like he's going to test it regardless, but I agree with you. It looks like it does.
Yeah, rook f2 now. You actually give up the g4 pawn for the f6 pawn, but once these trades happen, and now it's not double bad pawns for white against two solid pawns for black. No, it's just bishop takes f6 and
rook takes g2, and I guess you draw that, but you draw that by keeping the bishop. Let's say.
Well, so you can take on g2 and then play king f2 at the end. I know this because I did opposition practice with some PogChamps participants. So rook takes g2 does make a draw after king f6. There's king f2. This is actually very instructive.
The only reason Robert knows this is because of the PogChamps instruction.
No, it's the reason I remember it, not the reason I know it. But rook takes g2 does force a draw, and Roberto is thinking about it. And if he plays it, it will be a draw. I actually did a stream where 45 minutes. Here we're seeing just that. I was talking about you want to blockade the pawn in the most advanced way possible, but you need to initiate opposition. So if king f5, king f3. If king e5, king e3. You initiate the opposition here. King g3 or king e3 is fine because the king is going away from the pawn. So you're in the most advanced square possible, blockading the pawn while still initiating opposition.
And Lars knows this as well. Pretty much the reason he played on was to get this position right here. Hey, he's got an extra pawn. He showed off, Robert. He honestly did play really well that game, just not enough to win.
Let's show some of those moments from, if we can pull up the past games, just if we can. The knight c8 check. Some people were asking about that. We might as well before we get into the bullet.
We can find these games.
Just in the player history, and then and we can also show the checkmate in one move that was overlooked. So just a 1 point match. This is really close stuff. We last saw Levy Rosman and Eric Rosen enter a tiebreak match at the end. It was that even, but these two players look like they're well on their way headed towards an even match down the stretch. I see you pulled it up there. So
this was the checkmate that you were referring to earlier, and we were sort of like chatting about the game and didn't really notice what was going on. And big moment, of course, we mentioned it in the broadcast. Knight takes f7, missed by Lars, and then as a result, an even bigger moment missed with just rook d1, blundering on the spot. You see the valuation bar disappears. Queen takes g2 mate. Just forgetting that those pieces coordinated, because remember, it was not queen g5 that was played by black. It was actually an exchange, so sort of a tricky way for that queen to arrive on that square.
That's right. Always be careful of bishops on the fianchettoed long diagonal, and this one helped black deliver a checkmate. There was that other game where there was knight fork missed by Roberto, but you win some, you miss some. It happens in blitz chess. We don't blame any of the players. But Aman, before we head to break, any just thoughts heading into bullet here, as Lars down only 1 point and has been very strong in bullet in his previous matches?
First of all, this match, there's a reason we showed the tiebreak formula, because there's a good chance that it might be used. So I think this is going to go down to, just a couple games in either direction. Both of these guys, 2,800 blitz players, Robert. So no joke at all. I think that each side is loosening up. We have a lot of blunders from both sides. So what I'm expecting from the bullet is everything we've seen, but magnified. Maybe bigger blunders, maybe bigger attacks, worse opening positions. It's going to be crazy. I'm strapped in. I'm ready for this, Robert. But I think it's going to be a super close match either way. We may actually get a tiebreak.
You may be strapped in, but you can unbuckle your seatbelts for now. We're going to take a few-minute break, and when we return, the players will be back ready for bullet chess. So I hope you're excited, everybody. We'll be back very shortly for more from the IM GM Speed Chess Championship. And the players are trying to win this match. And what's at stake? There is prize money, but they're going to enter the finals against the winner of Greg Shahade and Levi Rosman Gotham Chess. So Aman, of course, the players here, Lars and Roberto, they're focusing on each other, on the games ahead in Bullet. But which player do you see winning on the other side of the bracket?
Well, it's the important question, because this is the other side of the semifinal, the only other match that's going to be played. We know all the contestants of who may reach the finals, as you can see from the bracket right here. Greg, number one seed going in. I think that most people would have Greg as the favorite based on his matches, especially because Levy was toe to toe with Canty for a huge portion of that match. And then with Rosen, it was more than toe to toe. It was toenail to toenail, as they even went into a tiebreak to end it off. So Levy's matches have been closer, but he's hitting new high ratings right now, Robert. Very tough match to call, but if Levy continues at the blitz pace that he's going right now, I definitely think that he has what it takes to take out the number one seed, Greg Shahade.
And we have lifted up. I asked the question because I said Greg was in chat, so I just wanted to hear your thoughts. And look at this. We have this G4, F4 against the Caro again, and Knight G3 quickly. So we liked Lars's position when we saw this earlier. It feels like forever ago at this point. Do we think that the players looked at this at some point, or they're just going based on their history?
I feel like they're just going. Lars doesn't strike me as a look at things guy. He just strikes me as a go guy,
Yeah, I wouldn't say that he is the theoretician of this matchup, but I like the way he plays. It's just really exciting chess. He drops the bishop back to f2 because knight f5 would have come with tempo. Now knight f5 would drop the pawn on g6. So he did improve this a little bit, and he now plays h4. He's going to go for h5, and look at him. We have the absolute five-head cam. He is right up against the camera, paying attention to the computer screen.
Actual. Knight takes f5.
Wow.
Very interesting decision.
Okay, so he wants the g file to go against his now pawn on g6, but black can also go against the h pawn, queen h7, bishop e7, things of that nature, and here we see that happen.
Yeah, and I think that Roberto should delay capturing on h4.
I agree, but I'm just trying to figure out, maybe if you could get your knight to somewhere to defend g6, that would be ideal. I just don't see a way for the knight to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like
knight's going to d3.
I was saying like knight b5, knight a7, knight c8, knight e7, but you can't do all that.
It's a lot to ask.
Yeah, too much. So king should probably go. Okay, trades rooks. This looks locked up. I would say, Aman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say black's position looks better to me because that pawn f4, but that's not easy to go after either.
Yeah, I think it is just exactly what the engine is describing. A very, very even position. If it gets spicy, it's going to be, some sort of c5 break, trying to open the position up. And black is a little bit defensive here as Lars controls the position. I think that the only reason we might see a result is because this is bullet.
That's, I would say, going to be the case. And I'm wondering which side will push first. Lars is down a point on the scoreboard, so you may think that he's the one who's going to do something drastic. But I'm looking
C5.
I'm looking at that a4 pawn exactly. C5 looks like it was ready. And can you get away with taking this a4 pawn? That's the big question.
I don't know about that.
Oh,
but he has got to give it a try. Remember, the knight comes back to c7.
That's true. But queen f6, queen f8, like that. Okay, trades rooks. Instead of going for the attack, he decides that the rooks off the board is sufficient. But the queen comes back to e8 now for black.
Well, this is very bad for sure.
Oh, this is also that queen go to b5 next if you're not careful. The queen b5 right now hits b2.
Queen b5.
And you threaten queen f1 check if the king goes to c1.
Yep.
Or queen e2 check if the king. So queen e2.
Yeah, queen e2, knight d2. But the queen on f6 is doing nothing. Just queen b4. Like, there's not a single threat for Lars.
No, there's not. Oh, queen hang. Oh, we didn't take the queen. The queen.
Oh my goodness. These guys are never seeing the tactics they need to be seeing.
There was a queen hanging for free, but it doesn't matter in a sense because Roberto is well ahead here. And that knight on c7 is a wonderful block hitter. And that is good overall match recognition by Lars to resign. Didn't want to even waste a few more seconds. He has 21 plus minutes. He needs more games.
And we actually see I guess a very, very uncommon opening, the Coley system. Normally people are getting that bishop out, turning it into a Trompovsky or a London, but instead we see sort of an old system with e4 played, and honestly has to be considered a mistake that Black allowed e4 when his pawn was on b6. This doesn't make any sense. This is horrible for Black.
And usually there's this bishop on c1 is out in the open somewhere, but now it's not. And well, it looked bad for Black, but all of a sudden with the trades happening, perhaps it's not so bad anymore. The bishop on d3 is so important to the kingside attack. Although this, yeah, still looks good. I mean, the control of the center, the light squares on the queen side. I would take White's position, that's for sure.
Maybe rook b8 and b5 is an idea, because yeah, I do prefer White's position. The knight on d4, very, very strong, but it looks like b5 is some source of counterplay that Lars could use.
So let's see. And it's a 2-game lead right now for Roberto. And honestly, look at Lars go. The knight's getting into c5 and b4. That b3 pawn not looking very good there. I could see this turning in Lars's favor. And I already like his position.
I definitely agree, but it's just wild to me that after knight a6, threatening nothing, White decided to go c4 and allow the knight to just go to b4. So I don't get that decision at all.
Well, Roberto has shown some nerves. I wonder if that's a part of it. He's just trying to come up with good moves under the duress of time trouble. And now that there's a pawn on d5, that's an isolated pawn, that should be good for White to go after. I still think Black's position is good. Look at the knight coming to c3 real quick. Bishop coming to c5. Black's piece is coming to life.
Yep. Knight d6 ideas as well. Rook e2, knight c3. So it's going to be the other knight jumping in, but
rook e5. That's a
yeah.
pawn.
Everything is loose here.
Wow. And f3. There's like rook takes f5, so he didn't go for that. And just an extra pawn for Black.
Yep. f3 can trade the rooks. There's king f8 for Lars, if necessary. Strong bishop on c5. Look at that, tying the rook down on d1.
And good pre-moving, by the way, from Roberto, just taking that rook first, and now rook e2. Yeah, the f2 pawn, and then rook b2 to go after the b3 pawn. When you have a bishop versus knight, the side with the bishop wants pawns on both sides of the board.
And I think rook d5 is still good. There's a5 as an idea to follow up, and that's why he played rook c2.
Okay, but a5, right, you can just take it, remove your bishop out the way. Rook c3, there'd be rook d3. You don't quite want to trade
a5.
rooks. Yeah, you don't want to, and you don't quite want to trade rooks for Black because the bishop against the knight dynamic. Wait, he could have taken on g5.
What?
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Yeah, he could have taken instead. He pushed, and he's still better, but things are
95 though. Things are getting very messy now. f7, b6, all hanging.
You know, King had to step into the discovery.
g6.
Wow. a5. a5.
a5 is huge move. I think you almost take it.
He did take it. Now knight c5, and White is the one up a piece for 2 pawns.
It's amazing how that turned around.
And look at the clock, by the way. You have to play this if you're Lars, but honestly, you could almost resign.
It's resignable. The problem is that it doesn't matter if you lose this or not at this point. It's all about the time.
Yes.
Well, that's a
hung a rook.
Well, he was mated, but
well, yeah. I don't think he really saw. His eyes kind of told us that he was like, oh, well, that wasn't right. And there's still 17 minutes left. It's only a 3-point match. And we were hyping up Lars's bullet prowess based on previous matches, but it's clear that Roberto came to play today.
Oh, yeah. No, at 2,800, you're not getting that reading for no reason, basically. He's playing super, super solid. And I think it helped that going in, he sort of had the upper hand. So he knows that Lars, playing from the back foot, has to play a little bit riskier.
That's right. And we have a position here where it's even material. White has a bit more space. The knight can come to e4, for example. Maybe you'll push upon a c4 at some point. But Black has no weaknesses to target.
True.
Honestly, these positions frustrate me because I look at them. I'm like, White should be better. The engine's saying, what does it say? I see the eval bar. It looks like it's really good for White. And like how to break through. Honestly, playing g4 is a good start. Rook h1 now. Swing up to h7. Good work by Lars so far.
Yeah, and I like playing knight e5 in these positions and taking with the pawn. Um, at some point you'll kick that knight out, and the bishop on g5 is so dangerous.
There was an f5 move there that he could have played because the rooks were hitting each other. So
Oh
you have to
wow.
be careful about that kind of stuff. And Lars is all in on against the f7 pawn. He just remains to be seen how he attacks it again.
All light squares, as you can see. All light squares from Roberto. The rook on g7, pretty much nullified by the rook on d7, which is central and doing a lot more. Look at that.
Yeah, great move a3.
Rook f3. He's just playing very well right now.
And rook c7 can happen. The rook can just move away. Instead, king c6 first. The e3 bishop can be captured. At this point, Lars is just hoping to hold on and make a draw because, honestly, Roberto's dominating this game.
He's dominating.
And I see Roberto kind of like looking on the side of his eye. I'm guessing he's looking at the overall match time. So for everybody's awareness, the players, they're sharing their screens with the proctors. Nothing's amiss there. Fair play is being upheld, but they also can see keep a timer to see how much time is left to make sure that they're keeping
and
up.
the players can also, and I think that's a good resignation. These are terrible games for Lars. He's got to get better. The other thing that the players are often looking at, which is why I say the word poker face from time to time, is they're looking at the zoom. And that's a very real strategy. Look at the call between you and your opponent. Yeah, you're both on live, cam for a reason. A lot of the players have said in the post-game interview, they're often checking their opponents after every single move just to see their reaction. If they think they played a good tactic, check the webcam. What do they think of it?
Very true, because normally when you're playing over the board, you see that your opponent's expression just in front of you. And here with the Zoom call, you can look at it. A lot of players keep it off to the side. And honestly, I think more people keep it open than closed. Some people get distracted by it, but I think most want to see their opponent's reactions to get a better sense of the board. But right now, Lars up 15 seconds. I like his position. We once again have an isolated queen pawn, but there's a knight coming to e5 or maybe back to e4. The rook can go up to e6 at some knight c1.
Well, 95. I mean, you have to like Lars's position
F4,
here, except he
F4.
blunders F4. He knows it.
Oh, he just laughs, but it's just laughter because you're frustrated about situation after situation not going your way.
That is the worst move to play there.
And it's just such a natural one, too. That's the sad part.
Oh
I think black still has chances, by the way. Like this rook, bishop takes h3 next, rook g5 to follow. You have to be really careful if you're Roberto and you're down quite a lot of time.
Yeah. I think queen d2 looks strong.
Oh, bishop takes h3. Take that pawn.
I would take you, of course, for taking it.
Oh, gosh. And that's two pawns, right?
No doubt in my mind we're capturing that.
So it's 2 pawns for the piece. And white is an exposed king, and white's down under 20 seconds. So I think that Lars has a very legitimate chance. I love that move, queen f4, though.
Yeah.
It's a great move.
It's so strong.
And bishop e2, forcing the queen back into the view of a trade. Now you're down a piece for real.
For real.
It didn't feel that way with the queens on the board because the king could get in some trouble. But now with the queens off, it's much clearer.
Knight c4, hitting the not even hitting the b pawn. Wow.
Nope. Great play by Roberto. Those knights in d3 and d4, so strong. Look at all of white's pieces. They're involved. They're compact. Nothing's hanging. And the e6 bishop is going down in just a moment here. Taking them bishop h5.
Oof.
Oh, okay. Rook h4 played. Now king h8. Now.
Okay. Bishop h5. Now there's a bunch of checks to get out of this.
Right. Rook f6.
Still the e pawn hangs. Oh, okay. Or it doesn't.
And now knight e4, perhaps? It feels like black is sort of... Oh,
yeah.
Knight d7.
Knight d7 missed.
Okay, and now it's, once again, still some opportunity.
Knight d7? Nope. Okay.
Rook takes e5, rook takes f3 is what I was looking for, but I don't think it works out.
Yes, rook takes g5 at the end.
Yeah, the knight forks were so close, but not working.
And look at the amount of time. It's like Roberto's he's trolling because he's allowing Lars some chances. So Lars is like, yeah, I'll keep playing this game. But then he's taking so much time off the clock. So it's like it's kind of a brilliant strategy.
Yeah, just the overall match time, 11 minutes left. And they're just going back and forth. No draw to be made. And black's much worse. So it's time being taken and your positions. Oh, wait a second. I was supposed to say not getting better, but the 95. Is he holding this?
Take this draw? He's got 4 seconds. I think he'll take the draw.
Wow, what a hold though by Lars. Oh, nope.
What?
Okay, that's nope, can't do that. Cannot be playing for wins in positions where you're losing if you don't take the draw.
Oh, I don't have enough criticism to give that decision.
That was probably one out of just pure frustration that you keep. Oh, and there was A4. The knight loses defender. Wait a second. Take that knight. And now he's up a pawn. So maybe he made the right decision. Amon, we got to stop talking.
No, but Roberto's a troll because he's going to draw this game. He just plays A6. And it's taking more time off the clock. I'm telling you, this is a deep strategy from Roberto.
Oh,
God. Not doubt my man.
The deep fake here where he better hold this game then, because otherwise you can't justify it anymore. But yes, it looks like he's holding this game. This is unbelievable.
This is nasty.
And it's taking so much time. We're down to 10 minutes left.
Yeah. He's almost won the match. I think he's won the match, basically.
Well, you need to have time to start the last game. So if Lars can win the next 4 games after this in 9 minutes and 45 seconds, he still will have time to play that last one. And the only thing to watch out for is like a rook d2, g4 check, and the checkmate. But you're not getting this. This is just a draw. Just repeat moves.
Yeah, he's bringing the king there, but unfortunately, there's no. Rook f5 check.
Rook f5, and white could have played
for a win.
It's already moved 106. We would have had at least 160, more than that. We would have like 250 moves.
Guys, this is actually. Oh, play rook a8.
Yeah, don't take it. Don't take it.
Oh my god, this is actually 5-head. Roberto, this is brilliant.
It is. And just keep playing. Do not agree for a draw. As long as you don't blunder your rook, you're going to make the draw anyway.
Oh my goodness. Move 116.
Yeah, this is honestly just fantastic match play here. And there's no way at this point that white can lose the game.
At this point, even if he lost the game, this is where you just type worth.
And just look at him. He's just like, this is ridiculous, right? Oh, then we finally get the trade.
That was, we were getting close to fit. Like he did all he needed to do there.
No, he did that and then more. We were talking about this with 11 minutes left, and now we're down to 8.5. So he spent 2.5 minutes making the draw that could have been made a while back, and that's on Lars. He took that bishop on e4, which he should not have done.
Yeah, I can't believe he even put himself in a position to draw that game. So some credit over to Lars there for that one, but really what just happened there was not good for the Lars camp.
Well, this looks really good for white though, this position.
Yep, queen like h3.
How do you stop g6 played, bishop h6. Is there something knight d5, knight f7 at some point? It's really close, but I don't think it works. So how to make it work?
So close.
Oh, it's just so frustrating to have this position where you're doing well and you can't put the game away.
Mm-hmm.
And knight c4. Okay, knight c6. Just trying to trade the knights off.
Like, at this point, is it knight f7, knight d5, queen d5, knight f7, bishop a2, and d5? Do you just go like insane?
Go all in? Just give up everything?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go like knight d5, knight f7. Bishop a2, this is me. I'm over here, Robert. I'll be here all day.
I like it. I like the idea. It probably wouldn't work out objectively, but I'm still here for it. And how about take on g6 now? Oh, takes on f7.
G6,
okay,
a bit better.
He'll take on f6 and take on h7 and then take on g6. He's taking everything.
Fair.
So I'm looking at the clock, 6 minutes and 50 seconds, and somehow the Evo didn't like that move. It looked fine to me, but I'm just looking at the match clock because Lars needs to win and needs to win just instantly every single time.
I think the reason that knight d5 wasn't preferred is that you don't need it to play bishop f6, queen h7, and you may as well keep pieces on the board. You never know when or how you're going to need them.
Right, the king
calculation.
The king possibly has more room to us. What? The king's on f6.
Queen
oh my
h5
gosh.
though.
That is queen h5 head right there. That was so smart. The queens have to come off.
That's why you don't play knight d5, Robert. Right there.
Oh
That's the
my
answer.
gosh, that was so smart. That that he was already well on his way to winning the match, but that is securing it.
And Robert definitely just said that was queen h5 head.
I've been ruined, or I'm kind of ascending to the next level. I'm not sure which one, but either way, Twitch lingo is the vernacular has entered my vocabulary.
I'll give you that one. That was a slick one.
Yeah, appreciate that. Just wow, wow, wow. Roberto has proven his might from the very beginning, even before the first match took place. We talked to Krikor Mkhitaryan, grandmaster from Brazil, very popular streamer, and he was just telling us, we know Roberto from playing him and seeing his games, but he was just saying this guy is real strong. He hasn't had as much opportunity as he would like to try to become a grandmaster. But he said to us in a post-match interview that he wants to become a GM, and I've been very impressed with his level of play throughout this tournament. So
Agree. 87 and rook d6 blundered.
And Lars just laughs. He's just like, this is
at that point. You might have mouse slipped rook d6, but what does it really change? Doesn't do much for this match. Doesn't do much. Sorry, for this game, and doesn't do much for this match.
No, and Lars, he was close heading into the bullet, and just one of those days where evenly rated players, one shines and one has to say, I don't know what I could have done differently. This was just a fantastic showing by Roberto. So both players have been excellent. We're getting down to the final stretch of games here. 4.5 minutes, not enough time to erase a 5-point deficit. And Lars has a decent position right now. Just at this point, you're in the mindset of, it doesn't matter. I lost, so who cares if I win this game? Even if prize money, the second half of the prize money is split by win percentage, just you already feel deflated.
Exactly. Queen f4, good move, by the way. But knight g4?
Knight g4 looks real good.
Knight g4 at g3, queen h6, I was thinking, but probably still available to some degree after bishop d7.
I like knight g4. You have to play g3 and queen h6. You have to play h4. So there are no options there.
Okay, now getting the queen back, queen g3. these are going to be easier moves to play.
And this bishop on, sorry, I was just saying this bishop on d3 is so strong. Like, it's underrated, but that pawn c2 bishop d3 configuration can't
cover everything.
Whoa.
He wants rook h4, I think, but I was going to say rook h4 first, and then maybe rook bishop takes h3.
And look at Roberto, f4. Honestly, a pretty smart idea by Lars, just trying to win the game, and it doesn't win. And f4 says, well, no rook pins for you.
Yeah, queen h5 is threatening nothing. And a queen trade, man, Roberto, these queen trades they're spicy. Like, these are like tactics, how he finds these queen trades.
Seriously. He's just so on point when it comes to stymieing his opponent's attack and just trying to trade off pieces to make his king feel safer. He's shown a prowess in that many times throughout the match. And look,
gonna keep playing. Could take draws. I mean, it's totally up to him at this point.
Oh, this looks too good for white to just make a draw. King d2 even, play f5 in the near future. Start. Yeah, there it goes.
Even though he doesn't have to, he's even making this game last a long time.
He's probably just going to win the game.
Yeah.
Right, up a piece for how many pawns? Just 2 pawns. Was about to be 1, and then probably about to be 0. And rook d7 now. Yikes. No, this is from bad to worse to just feeling.
Yeah, there's there's nothing to do here, guys. This is just a very, very well played finish. Ooh, rook to f8 check for style point.
That's he plays it. Wow, hey, that is beautiful.
10 out of 10 over here. That's 10 out of 10.
Yes, that is a fair rating for that rook f8. Wonderful stuff. And Roberto, this was closer than the match score would indicate right now. But honestly, after going through 25 minutes of bullet, it does queen a5 check. I was like, what is bishop f5? It's actually a line, but it feels not that close. I don't know. How do you reflect upon this match right
now? Completely outclassed in bullet. I think that it truly was super close in the blitz. And actually, I was really impressed with Lars's blitz chess. So I thought that going into the bullet, it would definitely be a close match because I think he needed to keep the blitz score close in order to have a chance there. But I think what Roberto is showing is that he does have the style for bullet. That's solid style, queen trade, stay up on the clock. Lars is basically sort of flailing, going for speculative sacrifices. And the thing with that style is that when it works, I mean, you're kind of sailing, you're feeling great. But when it doesn't work, you often experience a very good defender. And I think he met one today in Roberto Molina. A very good defender is able to frustrate that style in a way that is so annoying.
And earlier in the match, I think that Lars was playing well and caught Roberto in a style he wasn't quite comfortable with. I mean, I see a knight on f5, and I'm reminded that earlier game when Lars was black and Roberto sacrificed the pawn, but Lars played really well to save his king and then win the game. And here it looks like, the last flails, as you said, for Lars as the time is about to end. Right. Just trying to make things a bit spicy, go after the g7 pawn, hope that you can get one for the road, a victory. Last one, and I guess bishop g7, queen g4, it backfires. You get mated first.
Oof. Yeah, there's not a good way to do this. The knight's going to come back to g6, and that's going to be an extra d pawn. Yeah, f6.
Yeah, you can blockade the d pawn, but you're still down a pawn. The knight comes back to g6.
You might just sack it.
You think so?
I think there's a very real chance.
Yeah, it just doesn't amount to much, at least in terms of attack.
The match is over type of.
Yeah, you might as well.
Logic.
So well done by Roberto. Very impressive. And he's farmed how many rating points at this point? Like 40 rating points from Lars in bullet chess.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, and the resignation happens. The match is over. Just
Yeah.
Didn't make a difference.
He just wants out.
Yeah, he wants out. So what I was going to say is I'm not sure it matters who Roberto faces. I think he's the favorite just based on what we saw today and his previous matches.
Yeah, he's basically made a case for himself in bullet like not many others have, and he's made a case based on consistency. 2800 level bullet, but a consistent style. Not necessarily the most tactical. He goes toe-to-toe in tactics when he needs to, but he doesn't initiate those tactical sequences. I think he's got a very solid style, and that means that he's rarely going to have matches where he has blowouts. So today is really an exception to that. He just played amazing in bullet. Lars didn't have the attacks, the sacrifices, and his intuition didn't go his way today. But in general, I think we brought up a great point. Roberto is looking dangerous. And, Greg Shahade and Levy Rosman watching this match and going, oh, man, I'm not even sure I want to win if I have to play him.
Well, we'll hear from the players in just a few moments. We'll get their thoughts in a post-match interview. Stay tuned, everybody. Lars and Roberto will be joining us very shortly.
And we are back, joined by the players from today's match. That is Roberto Molina and Lars Oskar Hauge. Welcome, guys. I go over you to start there, Roberto. The match was a very close affair today in the blitz portion, both of them actually, and then it was actually the bullet section where everything changed, and the final score didn't feel like it reflected the match. How did you feel about the match overall? Because it looked like it was very close to us going into the bullet.
Yeah, I think some games I was with a good position and I blundered something, but the same way to Hauge. And I think if in these games I was more, for example, playing accurate, I think maybe the score in blitz will be some difference, but it's normal in blitz. No? We can win, we can be winning, but after a blunder you can lose.
Yeah.
I dropped some pieces. I don't remember.
There were a lot of
But
pieces
it's okay.
dropped, I think.
Blitz is complicated, no?
I definitely agree. And Lars, on your end, you were facing an early deficit, but then you evened up the match. It was even for a long while. And then towards the end of the 3-minute portion, Roberto started winning some games, including a checkmate in one on G2. Would you say that's where the match got away from you even before the bullet, or was something going wrong in the bullet?
Yeah, like the last two of the Blitz games went like poorly when I blundered mate in one, and like either the game before that or after I played very poorly. So when I went into the bullet and I lost, I just knew that I didn't have a chance. So I started like in the bullet games, I just gave away all pieces to try to end the game fast, but it just ended in me losing every game. So I didn't stand a chance in the bullet, but I think maybe I could have if I played a bit better in the blitz games, because then I wouldn't have been so aggressive in the bullet games.
Yeah, it makes sense to go aggressive when you need those points at the end. Speaking of aggression, to highlight some of the good moments, you actually had a really nice attacking game in the blitz portion where you had his king all the way out on h5, g5 running around, and there was a nice checkmate that looked like you were going to deliver if he didn't flag. But that, I believe that was against his Caro-Kann. Did you do any preparation against the Caro-Kann? Because that's one of his main openings, I believe.
Yeah, I mainly prepared as black, not that much as white. So I just thought that I would go for the. I played like in the advanced version like a knight c3 g4 line, which I had like I knew pretty well, but when you played f6, I didn't know what to do. So that was the end line I have like kind of prepared in the Caro-Kann.
Yeah. And Roberto, on your end, we were very impressed when you had some difficult positions. You were able to trade queens, but do so very resourcefully and tactically. What can you say about your defense today? Because that was just as impressive as some of your more tactical, aggressive games.
My style game is always like this: changing queens, going to end games, and looking for some technical position, complications, positions with very high complications. I don't like so much, and I prefer to avoid this. But it's, for example, some game with King E7. I think I will lose that game, but in the beginning of the match.
Mm-hmm.
E7, I don't like this position, but sometimes we need to play, no? But I prefer change queens and play in the games. And
understandable. And Lars, I wanted to ask you about a position that it looked like you guys were both repeating from white and black. It seemed like this isolated pawn position. You were constantly getting it with white and black. Is that because you thought you had a good chances here, or you were happy getting that position every time?
Yeah, I was. I was happy with that position both with black and white, so I just kept going for it. But I think I still scored pretty badly in those positions. Like when I had the black pieces, like I kept blundering on a6, and in the Caro-Kann games with white, I like the attack never worked. So it didn't turn out well, but I was happy with the openings in almost all the games.
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic match. And Roberto, we'd be remiss not to ask you. Well, you'll face the winner of Levy Rosman, Gotham Chess, and Greg Shahade. Do you have a preferred opponent between those two?
No. I think both players are very great, and I just will watch the games and maybe start some preparation. I don't know, but I will just watch the games. Just this.
Yep, I think that's the best preparation you can do. And if either of those guys were watching this match, I'm sure they're going to be well aware of who they're going to be facing in the final. Well, guys, I won't take more of your time, but Lars, thank you for the interview and the match. You made it very far in the competition, so I hope you definitely take solace in that, because we were always entertained watching your matches, and also to you, Roberto. Congrats on the match win. So, gentlemen, I'll let you go, but thanks for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks for opportunity.
Thank you. And congratulations once again to Roberto Molina. As you see in the bracket in front of you, he is the first person to make his way to the final. He looked dominant in the later stages of this match. At the end of the 3-minute, at the bullet section, of course, I think he won every single game. And Aman, he faces the winner of Greg Shahade and Levy Rosman. Now, he did not say who he'd prefer to play. He's a very nice guy. I honestly don't like asking that question because it feels like you're leading them to some answer. I just have to ask the question. He didn't answer. He's very professional. He said, I'm going to play who I have to play, and I'll prepare and all that good stuff. But what do you think? Based on the styles we saw, the games we just saw from Roberto, whose style is Roberto's play better matched up against?
Well, it's kind of interesting because if he plays against Greg, I feel like those games are going to be very, very technical. That's sort of how I feel like Greg likes to play. So, not that matchup is any more likely than the Rosman one, but if Roberto likes those kind of queenless middle games into end games, technical positions, I feel like he can get a lot of those against Greg. So it'll be basically who's better at that style. I feel like in that match, whereas Levy, I mean, you're going to get fireworks no matter what. You're going to get time trouble. There's always going to be other factors at play in a Levy Rosman match, and that's why his matches are so exciting. So I think for different reasons, both of those matchups could be very exciting.
I agree completely. And for Roberto, what a showing today in the semifinal. He should be really proud of himself because
100%.
that was a stressful match. We saw him earlier. He was hitting his own head. He was almost pulling his hair out. It seemed like he was the nervous one. And yet, when it came down to the quickest time control, he was the one that seemed very composed in the bullet, finding good move after good move, finding the tactics when they became available, making sure his king was safe when it needed to be protected. So I have to say that was an extremely professional performance by Roberto Molina in today's match.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up. Lars is an incredible player, and the final score made it look like that might not be the case. But of course, it is the case. I mean, you don't make it to the semifinals for no reason. Lars has been so dominant, especially in the bullet portion. So for that to flip around today just speaks to, Lars was saying, I was trying all these just attacks. They weren't working. But that's full credit to the defense that Roberto put on today. So super impressed by his resourcefulness, defense, able to trade the queens, as you highlighted. There's just so many things that Roberto did well that I really feel like whether he did preparation or not, he seemed well prepared.
For sure. And the mantra is defense wins championships. And Roberto, he's the first to say, I want to trade queens. I don't want the complications. I prefer to have positions without all the tactical sequences where I have to be worried about missing one little thing that just loses the game. So Roberto's style, he's made it well known. We'll see who we face off against in the final. But Aman, I got to say, it was another great day commentating with you. I had a blast. This match was excellent, full of ups and downs. There were mates in one hung on the board. There was time pressure galore, and yet everyone was happy. We still have nearly 10,000 people watching. So I just got to say thank you again, partner. It's been a fun ride, and we still have another semifinal and a final left.
Yeah, let's remind the people it's been awesome today, but there's been so much chess happening that I feel like people need a reminder now and again about this tournament, because we're getting into the semifinal match with Levy, as well as the eventual final match between, whoever wins that match and Roberto Molina. And this tournament has been so exciting to cast that I think with all the hype with PogChamps, we just got to remind people that, hey, this tournament is not done yet, and it's only going to get more exciting from here.
Filled with great chess content creators, great personalities, and fantastic players. I think people often forget about that. And I know Peter Svidler is a great example where people are like, oh, he's an amazing chess commentator. And every now and then I have to remind people, he's also an amazing, amazing player who has
really
made just a great impact on our game. So I have to give a shout out to all the players in this field. There are only 3 left. Roberto in the final. He'll await the winner of Greg versus Levy. But you're right. This has been fantastic. We are in for a treat. We've already had a great time. There's more to come. So everybody, enjoy the rest of your days. Enjoy chess. And do not forget, on March 8th, we will have Levy versus Greg. We'll see you there.